Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
The Philosopher and The Fool. Hogwarts Legacy came out about 2 weeks ago or so. And I was like, I kind of want to play this game, but it's really expensive. And I was looking at the gameplay, and it's like, the gameplay doesn't even look that great. I had more to be in Hogwarts even then. Like, they sort of did some things good, some things so not. And it has that anti-cheat software installed.
De novo.
Yeah, de novo, which just can screw over certain PCs. Like, there's just a chance that it messes your PC up. It's like, it's kind of a hard choice, but I'm not certain, so I don't think I'll get it. And recently, very recently, a new game came out called Atomic Heart. And I was watching a streamer play it, and it looks kind of interesting. However, like, certain bits of the combat are just sort of like not very oomphy, and it has a bunch of other problems. And apparently a lot of people are finding it very buggy, and this one streamer's lucky that he's only encountered about 3 bugs. And at one point he said, the combat's alright, but it's no Might and Magic Dark Messiah. I was like, Cameron knows that game, so I downloaded Might and Magic Dark Messiah.
Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, I
think.
Yeah,
right, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. And I played that a bit, and I bought it on my own account, just so could have it separate now, because I enjoyed it so much. I was thinking, why aren't modern video games having combat as good as this? And like, there's a lot of things that are bad with it. Like, there's a lot of problems. There's certain parts of the game I don't like. But overall, it's combat.
Have you gotten to the stealth section in the caverns yet?
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yes, no, that's horrible. I hate that bit. And
I don't even believe it's winnable. Like, I cannot get past it.
I got past it. It took me quite a few tries, though. But there's just something about that combat. It's very... it's there. You feel
Have you
it.
played... you've played Dishonored, right? Or
yeah,
no?
I've played
or
Dishonored.
You watched it?
I played Dishonored. I watched all of Dishonored.
Okay.
I've watched 2 different people play it, and I've played it myself.
And have you played Prey?
I haven't played Prey.
Because that's the same guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're still making games.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's the same company, but it's the same guys, Looking Glass Studios. They go all the way back to like Thief and Arx Fatalis.
Oh, they also did Thief?
And Arx Fatalis. Yeah, like basically any good game. I think they might have done that other one too. Takes place in the future. Your name's Agent Denton, I think. You're a cyborg who didn't want to be a cyborg. You were forced to be a cyborg.
Ex Machina?
Yeah, Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Or Ex Machina, whatever it's called.
Yeah, Deus Ex.
Deus Ex,
that's it.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made those as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're the kind of masters of the immersive sim.
Even, like, Dishonored...
Them and Troika, which I believe a lot of them are members of Troika, which did Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah.
And...
So, Dishonored's combat, I like. I like Dark Messiah's more. Even though, in some ways... Dishonored's combat might be better. They definitely have a more stealth-based approach to the game. But like Dark Messiah, the kick is so satisfying, and how they just sprinkle these environmental things for you to play with, and finding one of the best ways to play the game is literally pick up barrels and throw it at people. And I find with some games, like, you figure out the optimal strategy and it gets samey, like Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah.
I found while I was playing that game, one of the things that I did was run up a wall, jump off the wall, take out enemy. Run up a wall, jump up a wall. Because you can do that over and over again. It works really well. But then I started like, I don't want to do this anymore because it's just not fun. In Dark Messiah, I've found so far playing. I haven't played it that much. I mean, I played it quite a bit last night and the night before that. But picking up barrels and just throwing them works.
But there's also in-depth combat you can do.
Yeah.
And you can just stealth around a lot of problems.
I got I don't know how the adrenaline activates, but I have telekinesis. And so wherever adrenaline activates, you can pick up enemies and throw them with your magic.
So at the start of the game, you have to crawl through a forge.
Yeah.
Did you play around with the forge at all?
No.
Because you can pick up those lumps of metal, stick them in the forge, they'll melt. And then you can swivel around the mechanism to pour out the molten iron into the cast. You can get a mold in there. You can quench the sword, and you can make a sword.
Huh.
It has stuff like that everywhere.
Yeah, no.
That's what the company does. There's in Arx Fatalis. I haven't played Arx Fatalis, but I've heard about this. There's a quest where you have to kill the Goblin King.
Yeah.
And one of the things you can do is gather all the ingredients for bread. Make bread, put poison in the bread, leave the bread around where he'll eat it, and then he'll die. Like, it's crazy,
So there's this mission in the game. The game crashed, so I had to do the mission twice. Because even on Steam, it still has its old bugs. But you're there's a blackguard trying to get onto a boat. And first you yourself have to get in the boat. You take out all the guards on the boat. Then your allies go on the boat. And it's like, if your allies die, you lose the mission. So you basically have to guard the gangplank. So the first time I played it, I just kicked every single guy who came running off back down the gangplank. And that's the thing I've found that works quite well, is standing at the top of ramps and staircases and just kicking people down them. But one of the big things about this boat is you can actually try to frontal assault the boat. However, you're going to die because there's a bunch of ballistas that the blackguards have control of. So the second time I did, I was like, wait a minute. I went to the ballistas below deck, activated one, got onto it, and all the blackguard that are trying to now get on the boat, I just fired the ballista at them. And so I got to do both experiences. And it's like both paths are completely legitimate. And there's this, you have done this part, which is you're supposed to get into a warehouse. And so you can crawl in through the underground tunnels to get in, or you can walk in through the front door, or you can climb over chains and swing your way in.
That's how I did it, was the chains and whatnot.
Yeah, there's 3 different approaches that I found.
But the chains, the Source Engine climbing is really annoying.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I still don't understand how it works. Like, I did the tutorial and
I found holding down space when you're trying to climb up an obstacle is how you have to do it, because if you just tap space, your character will fall off any ledge he's trying to hold on to.
Yeah, I really like games that, it's not just good combat.
Yeah.
Like you, Smash Bros. Or Dark Souls have very good combat.
Yeah.
But I really like creative combat.
Yeah. No, it's very creative combat. And even, like, you wander about, and even though it's not Skyrim's, like, fully integrated NPCs, you walk past one person, and he says a line that lets you know a little bit about that world, and then you walk him by, and you don't need that person to have the whole thing, because you're not going to spend time there, but they just say that line, and the movement of the character, like, it's really good. I'm just thinking, this game is quite old, and probably people have played it, people know about it. Is it hard to take this combat, like just a little bit of this combat, and put it into other games? Like Skyrim's big revolutionary thing that made it feel so good was Fusro Dawes. Like, I Fusro Dawes someone and they go tumbling off a cliff, it's really good, or they get knocked down the corridor, or like the objects on the table bounce off. This game already had that, and it's not even a spell. Like, it's not your big spell, it's your kick. It's your get away from me, let me control the environment a little bit.
There's certain games like Dad Quest out there that do have that in-depth combat, but the problem, Yahtzee talked about this actually, and I thought at the time he was a bit harsh, but looking back I think he might have been right, where Dad Quest is a roguelite, or a progressive arcade.
Yeah. And
Yahtzee said, you know, a lot of these progressive arcade type games, he didn't say it that, but I'm going to make it stick, they feel like proof of concepts for a game. They feel like game demos. Like, okay, here's an idea. We don't have the world built yet, so here's just a way to test out the idea.
Yeah.
And like Dad Quest especially looks like it would make an amazing RPG. Like, it could be a linear RPG. Like Dark Messiah is not open world at all.
No, it's linear.
It's like you're basically walking down a corridor.
I actually feel like at some point, or I hope, that game studios will move back to linear, because very few people can do open world justice or properly, or have any idea what makes an open world game a good open world game. Like, even the first open world game that a lot of people think of is
Arena. Like just
Ocarina of Time.
Right.
Is the sort of, this is like, oh, this is the OG open world that I play with. It's so cool to walk around. Ocarina of Time is not an open world. It's a hub where you go to a bunch of linear paths.
Yeah, so I guess Daggerfall, or one of the Ultima games.
Yeah. Like, that's why I said what most people think of at first.
Oh, Ultima was really popular back in the day, so it depends on the person.
Yes.
But, yeah, like this sort of modern 3D open world, because Ultima's 2D. But...
like the game Atomic Heart, it starts you out in this linear path that you crawl through, and it sort of has like the back and forth Metroid dungeon you start with. And then you leave that dungeon into an open world, and all the mechanics they established in this dungeon you're in basically break, and that's what the streamer's complaining about now. It's like, they have this whole stealth thing, and in the open world, it just doesn't work at all. And it's like, why are you trying to be a stealth game? You're not a stealth game.
I think an amazing compromise is a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
Like, Dark Souls is basically a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
And I think it works really well. You have, because you have a complete feeling of freedom, but you have a highly curated world.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful mix. And it's very, like you said, it's very hard to do an actual open world right.
Like, Elden Ring, I think, barely does it right, actually. Like, Elden Ring could have been linear.
I haven't played Elden Ring, so I can't.
And I don't want to spoil it because you don't want mechanic spoils, but there's aspects I like about his open world, and in a second playthrough, I'm going to try to abuse those, but it doesn't actually need to be open world. And even then, it's like barely an open world and barely does it right.
I think the companies that do manage to do open world, like you said, they're few and far between.
Yeah.
You have Larian, you have Bethesda, you have BioWare, once upon a time, maybe not anymore.
Yeah.
You have potentially, what are they called? Squaresoft, the Dark Souls guys, whatever their name is. And
Well, they're going to make DLC for the game, obviously.
you have Nintendo.
Yeah, they're going to make DLC, but I don't think when they do their next Souls game, I don't think they should do open world.
I was going to say you have, what are they called? They're called Ice Wind Studios, Cryo Ice, the Shadow of Mordor guys. But I've been playing Shadow of Mordor recently.
Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War.
The first game.
Yeah.
So Mordor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very Bethesda feeling. I mean, not Bethesda. It's very Ubisoft feeling.
Yes.
And Ubisoft does not know how to do open worlds.
No, Shadow of War...
Like, they just...
It's a fun game, and I like it, but its open world is literally walking to place.
But it's so... I thought the tutorial was amazing. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, this is one of the best designed tutorials I've ever seen, because you're doing the story.
No, best designed tutorial...
Was Mario.
Well, one of the best designed tutorials is Dark Messiah. Like that tutorial, I love that tutorial of like the guy's like, I'm talking to you in your brain. Do this. Now do this. Now do this. You idiot. Do this. Now climb up this thing. Yes, you're serving my purpose. Ha 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 ha. You can stick around and play in this place or you can leave. Okay, we're leaving now. And something about that tutorial really works for me. It's very quick and it gave you the game. It's like, this is how the game works. There you go.
What I like, a lot of games, they have cutscenes, right?
Yeah.
And the cutscenes are very boring and annoying. Mordor combines its cutscenes with its tutorial in a really interesting way. Like, to teach you how to do stealth takedowns, you give your wife flowers.
Yeah.
It's like crouch and press X while behind her to give her flowers.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that's how you do that. And then you're teaching your son how to fight. And then you're rescuing your son.
Yeah, and then it gives you the counterbalance of you doing all those things against orcs in a very brutal fashion right afterwards.
Yeah. And you're engaged with the story, you're engaged with the tutorial at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's not dumbed down to you. Like, you're not teaching, like, a hardened ranger of the Black Gate how to fight. He's teaching someone else, and he's giving his wife flowers.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like in The Witcher, that tutorial is like, oh, Geralt, do you remember how to parry and how to block? It's like, yeah, of course he does. He's 70 years old.
Is it, I can't remember if it's Witcher 1 or Witcher 2, but that game's tutorial is literally, Geralt is literally in an arena, and there's men charging him, and it's basically, try not to die. That's the tutorial. I think it's number 1 that did that, because number 1 was kind of brutal.
In Witcher 2, you fight that gargoyle.
Yeah, and Witcher 2, right, Witcher 2 starts with you going in the tower, so it's Witcher 1. That its tutorial is literally you just getting brutalized.
But Witcher 2 actually has Witcher 1 has an excuse, because Geralt lost his memory.
Yeah.
At the end of the books, Geralt loses his memory. So well, or rather, this is a massive spoiler in some ways, but it also isn't. It's kind of like saying Sherlock Holmes dies in the last book because there's a sequel.
Yeah.
So Geralt dies in book 5 of The Witcher. And I don't know if it was similar to Sherlock Holmes, but there's more books after that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, he was brought to Avalon, he's fine.
Ah.
And so the games are based on just after he dies.
Ah.
And so it's like, oh no, he was saved and he lost his memory.
I see.
Yeah. And there's definitely
Yeah, but on the
an excuse there.
on the spectrum of bad tutorials,
Pokemon.
well, Pokemon, yeah, but those 2 new games I wanted to get. Good God! So the Hogwarts Legacy, one of the things that turned me off it, this is like a 8-hour tutorial, and there's an aspect in some RPGs like Shadow of Mordor, where it's like, this is a new element we've given you the game, so we're going to give you a very brief tutorial on this new little mechanic to play with. Whereas in the Harry Potter game, it's like, this, now do this thing, and it takes you 15 minutes, and we're going to make a big deal about it, and do this thing, it takes 15 minutes. And with the Atomic Heart game, their first closed dungeon is kind of their tutorial, and that takes about 4 hours to do.
Yeah, it's weird how...
But I was thinking, like, the Dark Messiah actually has very similar gameplay. It doesn't have the stupid puzzles of Atomic Heart, but very similar gameplay. And that tutorial took me about 10 minutes, and I could have done it much shorter, but I was having fun. I was playing with it.
I think that a lot of companies are afraid of losing customers or something like that, so they have these tutorials so that no one gets left behind. But that loses customers in of itself.
Yeah.
And I think it's weird how you...
Well, that's the thing. So these games, like, one's $80, the Harry Potter. I think the Atomic Heart is $60. And I bought a $10 game to sort of feel the thing of what I wanted. I'm very, very happy that I got Dark Messiah. But
you have games that, like Heroes of Might and Magic or Daggerfall, where they're incredibly complicated games.
Yeah.
And there's not a tutorial. It's just go for it. And you figure it out. Like, it's not hard. You just mess up a lot until you get it.
Yeah.
And Slay the Spire, I think it has like a little tutorial that pops up at the start. But it's still like you just figure it out. But I've seen now games that are like, okay, this is your health. You have to make sure that doesn't go to 0. And this is your... Like, they're designed for someone that's never played a game before.
Yeah.
And even... The thing is, the first game I played was Heroes of Might and Magic 2, really. Like, that was the first game I really played. Beyond maybe, like, one of the old Super Nintendo or Nintendo games.
Yeah.
Like Ninja Turtles or something like that. And... Or, like, light gun type games.
Yeah.
And I figured it out. Like, it wasn't... Like, you just click on stuff and stuff happens, and maybe you play terribly. Like, you notice that you come back to a game like Heroes of Might and Magic, and you can play against the hardest AI. Whereas before, you were playing on the easiest or no AI at all, and you were struggling. Or you played so completely different, it was a totally different game. But that's fine. I was having fun. I was ignoring and missing so many mechanics, and that made it fun. First time I played Minecraft, I didn't know you could shift to hold down. You didn't either. And so... We
kept falling off things.
Yeah, but it meant that I found like this giant chasm in the earth.
Yeah.
And to go down it, I had to build a minecart down it because I kept falling off the chasm. So I had to build a mine track so that I could be wedged in the rails in order to get down. And we could flex on each other by building floating buildings because it was so difficult to do.
Yeah.
Because bridging out was really difficult when you'd fall off the edge. You had to actually move, like just very tap backwards until you were just hanging over the edge without actually falling off, and then you could put a new block down.
Or build a nerd pull-up.
Yeah.
Build it out, dig it down, build another nerd pull-up.
Yeah, and like surround the block as best you could and keep doing that. Yeah, and so it was like a flex to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so you're playing the game wrong, but you're having fun.
Yes.
And that's the point of the game.
Now, I was thinking, actually, with the coddling of Minecraft, sort of like certain mods it has now, of not going better than wolves, but getting a server at some point and not having just enough items on it. And like trying to disable the green book as well, because green book helps people now, but it's just like, go, like, figure it out, like, explore these.
I don't know, like, it's so complicated to...
some of the mods are ridiculous, though.
And just the recipes in general are not...
Not sensical.
Even if they make sense, like, most recipes try to make sense, right? But there is so many combinations.
Yeah.
Like, there's... I don't know the number, probably millions of combinations.
Now, the bigger, less coddling thing is disabling all grave mods, and so if you die, your stuff gets sprayed everywhere. Because I did find this problem, we're playing on this RP server, and it's very much, like, we're trying to do RP. None of us know how to do it, so we're kind of goofing around, but we have gravestone mods. But I'm playing, like, these order of religious fanatics who use flamethrowers. And a vampire shows up at my door. So I hit him with my silver mace, and he dies, and his corpse is left there, and he can come back and get his inventory. So he does that, and he sticks around too long, so I hit him with my mace again.
Oh, you can't access his gravestone?
No.
Okay. Because I think if you could access his gravestone, that'd be fine.
No, I think once they're left long enough, you can, but I sort of frown while I take it. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, like, stay away from my base. There needs to be more consequences than you just getting slightly annoyed and walking up. Like, I want to have, like, flamethrowers set up everywhere, so if you are not on the whitelist, you're going to get incinerated and your gear is going to be destroyed. And also, adding on top of that, like, people go, oh, I died in the nether and I can't get my gear. They ask the server admin, like, server admin, can you please, like, help me get my gear back? So I'm like, oh, okay, I'll get your gear back. Because, like, sort of buggy or weird grave. So I'm just thinking, like, these people have no concept of, like, oh no, the nether's dangerous. I should have, like, a ton of fire resistance. I should be super careful here. I should be building out these structures. And I will still probably die there, so I'm not going to take all my gear with me. I'm going to leave it in a chest at home and only take what's essential for, like, the mining out of this area.
And I still have our MC Miner plus Terra Firma Craft mod pack. You could make a server for that.
Yeah, but it's just... like I'm really starting, like, I die as well, but even then that's because I have the expectation of I can die and pretty easily get all my gear back. Like when we were playing earlier and it's like, oh, I'm really far away from home and we had to keep inventory, so I'd jump off a cliff to die to teleport back home as a free trip. And part of me, especially with this roleplay server, is thinking like, we should just get rid of all the gravestone mods.
Okay, so I've got two things on that. Yeah. So first of all, I actually recently installed Gravestone mod into my Hardly Hard mod pack.
Yeah.
And the reason I did it was I was thinking about how the item despawn, you can look at it multiple ways, I guess.
Yeah.
I see it as a way to reduce so that you can get rid of items permanently by checking them out of your inventory. Yeah. And also so that the game doesn't crawl to a halt when it's trying to keep track of millions of items lying around.
Yeah.
So if I die and I eventually find my old body, it's a technical limitation that I can't pick up the gear.
Yeah.
Because realistically, that sword should still be there, or maybe someone's stolen it and it's been decayed. So I installed the Gravestone mod. And now you could argue that just because the intention was to save space doesn't mean that there isn't a value in stuff despawning anyways.
Yeah.
But it is very disheartening when...
Well, your stuff gets incinerated in lava. Maybe...
Or when you die to something that feels completely out of your control. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes you just have to live with it. But then you know that all you have to do is go back to that spot to get back your gear. Like, it's going to be hard, but you can do it.
Yeah.
And then you're busy for 3 weeks, and you don't remember where you died.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I don't mind that I've lost my gear for, 4 in-game months. But it would be cool if I could stumble across where I died at some point. But instead of just losing everything, not because of the game mechanic, because in-game, I could have gotten back to that if I'd gone back to that. But I have hand injuries, right? So I can't play that long. But if instead I was like, okay, I don't want my memory to be the limitation, I guess, there. Like, if I don't want to play for 3 weeks, I don't want to lose my gear. Because then it's like forcing you to play.
In an RP sense, then, because a lot of the rules are established, like, don't grief other people's bases, that sort of thing. Like, you can assault their base, try to kill them in it, but don't grief their base. So maybe as a sense, if you die in someone else's base...
The gear is yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think I will add that as rules. Like, you play with fire, you get burnt.
Like, people can access your stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but only if it's in their base, because we're doing it by a rule of cool. Like, we have to trust each other with the rules.
So the second thing is that I wanted to add to that was... So you locked yourself out of your car recently.
Yeah.
Now this might be a big psychological armchair psychologist stretch, right?
Yeah.
But you lazy kids that don't have to think ahead and you just jump off of buildings so you die and get back. You don't think ahead in anything. You don't think ahead in life. You just close the door on your car while the keys are in it. So, whereas roguelike players, you know that death is final, and so you have to be prepared for it and avoid it at all costs.
The thing is, I'm usually actually very careful about that walking mechanic, but it was a situation, a car game, I was short on time, I was trying to get somewhere, the car got stuck in snow, and so I was getting out, like, sort of, like, okay, let's assess the situation, and I was locked out.
When you're stressed in a roguelike, that's the most important time to slow down and be calm, I think.
Yes, no, that was just a general thing, to slow down.
You privileged, spoiled kids with your keep inventory and your quick saves, your auto saves.
To note, people who don't play video games at all, our mother and stepdad, have taken that car to a dealer to have that feature disabled, but when the car's battery dies, it re-enables that feature.
Right. But they don't play roguelikes either, do they? I'm saying that... Now, I don't know if it's people that play roguelikes are better people, or if playing roguelikes makes you a better person.
I think it's in such cases that if there's a million times to mess up, that at least one of them you will, and then that's annoying.
Right, but roguelike players do it far less. And my question is, does being an ubermensch make you play roguelikes, or does playing roguelikes make you an ubermensch?
I think if you were driving that car, given enough opportunities, you would lock yourself out of it.
I never did.
You have driven, compared to me relatively of driving that car, you've driven probably 2% of what I've driven in that car.
I doubt it. I've driven that car a lot.
Yeah.
I've driven to other cities in that car. I've driven, towns. I've driven up mountains in that car. I've driven people all around town in that car. I've driven that car a lot.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I just, I'm the only one of our siblings that hasn't crashed a car either. So...
All right.
And none of you guys play roguelikes.
All right. So on the crashing the car thing, I have. This might make me sound worse, but I'm going to just have. I have only.
In my defense, I was drunk.
No, I have only crashed cars into not moving objects.
Yes, but you're supposed to scan your surroundings before you get into your car, and then use the review mirror.
Yes.
And yeah, all I'm saying is I'm the only one of our siblings that plays roguelikes, and I'm the only one that hasn't crashed a vehicle. You see the connection?
I think it's your personality of being lame that makes you play roguelikes and also thus not crash cars.
Like a sort of frightful timidness that
Yeah.
that prevents me from making as many mistakes because I take less risks.
Yes.
Yeah, and that lameness extends to wanting to play games like Rogue.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be.
Just one more thing on the Dark Messiah to wrap it up is, so when I was playing it, I got a feeling very early on, and it's persisted throughout the game, of maybe it's nostalgia, but I don't think it is. It's like, if I'd gotten this game when I was like 9 or 10 or 11 or 12, like, you sort of get that new video game and you play it like Dungeon Lords, or Dungeon Keeper, or New Heroes of My Magic game. Like, you get it as new and you get this feeling of, oh, this game is really good. Like, I just want to keep playing this game. It's very fun feeling, like it's just got that something to it that, like, a lot of new games, I get new games like, yeah, this is good, I can play it, I'm amused by it, it's fun, I like it, but I don't get that feeling of like, there's something to this game, And when I played Dark Messiah, I was like, there's something to this.
Yeah, it's because a lot of new games are garbage. A lot of old games are garbage too. It's just the ones that stuck around for you to access were typically the good ones.
Yeah.
But also it'd be hard to tell. Like you can check. It is possible, because I think 2007 was objectively the best year for AAA companies in terms of people enjoying their games. But AAA games seem to have really fallen off.
Yeah. Well, part of it, they all follow the same formula.
A lot of them also...
Whatever Yahtzee's horrible thing he calls it.
A lot of them also fail to deliver and are buggy and messy, and they're
Dark Messiah is buggy.
Now, I think the Harry Potter game is actually a case of a AAA game actually delivering. Now, there's nothing... Now, I haven't played it, but I've seen a review of it, and it looks like it actually delivers, which was a surprise, because most AAA games aren't delivering anymore.
One friend said it feels a bit like The Witcher, the combat, and he's saying, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
That's why he said, it's like, yeah, that's fair enough.
And I think that's why so many people liked The Witcher 3, it was actually a company saying, we've got a massive budget, let's use it.
Yeah.
Whereas a game like any Ubisoft game, or Forspoken or something like that.
You say any Ubisoft game, Dark Messiah is a Ubisoft game.
I guess technically.
Like, when you launch the game, they stopped actually having this, but that, like, this was definitely part of my nostalgia brain. You launch Here's My Magic 4,
and
it gets that Ubisoft Spirally In logo. I launched Dark Messiah, got that logo, I was like, something's in my brain has gone, whoa.
Well, all these big companies were once great, right? Like, EA did Dungeon Keeper, and all the...
And Assassin's Creed's original games were good.
If you like those games, yeah.
I enjoyed them. I found they were fun. Like the 1, 2, and 3, I have had fun playing them.
I think there's also a lot of good things in Valhalla and Odyssey. But what the issue is the AAA developers aren't pushing boundaries anymore. They're not even making, like, The Witcher.
Jim Lee Crockthroat, that's what he calls it.
The Witcher is a giant world.
Yeah.
And an indie studio cannot make a handcrafted giant world like The Witcher 3 could. And so that's where... And Witcher 3 wasn't even AAA, but... You need money to do that. And instead of doing that, these companies are copy-pasting stuff. They're not using their money to make something that no one else could do. They're making games that tiny companies can do better. And that's what's really disappointing people. And they're making them horrible, buggy messes, like Cyberpunk was a horrible, buggy mess. And it also didn't push any envelopes. It's just a standard open-world game, go to the collection points. Like, like, even a game like GTA 5, it's a massive world that other companies can't compete with. Red Dead Redemption... people love it just because of the sheer detail in the game. Like, everything is modeled, everything has detail.
You wander across a cabin, and there's a cannibal inside, and there's a whole story about this cannibal, and you're like, oh, okay. And then you like take 2 more steps, and there's a bear chasing someone up a tree.
And horses poop, and their testicles change size depending on the temperature.
And you leave tracks in the snow depending on its depth, and you like have trouble moving through it.
So people enjoy that sheer attention to detail. But I also think that that's just throwing money at a problem. And I don't actually like how Red Dead Redemption spent its money, like Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah.
I've only played number 1, but I know what 2 is like. And I don't think focusing on those little details matters so much as... So, for example, the Pokemon games. What they could do is they could have every single move every single Pokemon does
Independently animated.
have a unique animation for that Pokemon.
Yeah.
They could do that. They have the staff, they have the money to do that. And instead, they just copy-paste the same attack for 10 different attacks across all Pokemon. But they could do that detail. And that is it's a fighting game, it's a dog fighting game. And so, in that sense, that is important to have that level of detail. And for people that play Red Dead Redemption, they want to feel like they're in this world. So maybe that is an important level of detail to have all these little things that most people wouldn't pay attention to. Maybe it is important for them to have that. I like games like Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, where it's more about how much freedom, how much mechanics can we stick into this game? How much... And the important thing about having all this freedom and mechanics is this is something that a lot of games fail at, is you have to give the players a reason to use this freedom. You have to make them want to actually take advantage of these systems.
Yeah.
Because if there is, like in Skyrim, for example, the meme is a stealth archer. You have all this stuff you can do. You have hundreds of spells. You have this massive world, and everyone just plays as a stealth archer.
Yeah.
So you have to... So I have a mod that adds stress when you're in combat, and you need to drink to overcome stress. And if you drink in a tavern, you overcome stress faster.
Yeah.
So what that does is it makes you go to taverns more often. So you're hearing bards more often.
Yeah.
And you're actually interacting with the food and drink in the taverns. And it has modifiers that you can adjust. So I have it set so you gain stress 3 times as much if you use a bow. So that means you're incentivized to not use a bow.
Or use a bow quickly, like you shoot at the start of combat and then you put it away.
Yeah. So that gives you... And you could say, like, it's dishonorable, so that's stressing me out. You can even come up with a reason for it if you want.
I'm undead. I can't use a bow. I don't have a soul.
So it forces you to actually engage with the mechanics of the world. And that's very important. And Breath of the Wild also messed up with their hang glider, because the hang glider, they have surfing, they have horse riding, they have sand surfing, they have snowboarding, they have flying machines, sort of.
Horse riding.
Yeah, I already said that one.
Bear riding.
They have just running, and you can chop down trees, you can climb.
Yeah.
All of that is you can knock down a tree, stasis it, and ride that across the map. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, and all of that is subsumed by the glider. And so the glider was kind of a mistake, and I don't know the solution to it. Maybe you can only use it for so long, or it costs resources. Or one idea I thought of is that, Link's carrying thousands of things on him while he's running around, right?
Yeah.
So if his hands are up on the glider, maybe stuff starts falling out of his pockets while he glides. So you can go and get it back.
Yeah.
You might, you lose a couple rupees and some bokoblin guts, and you're like, whatever. But your diamond falls out, suddenly that's a quest in of itself, because you now have to get back to that spot, and that you have to walk there, you have to fight your way back out. It's a whole thing, and I think that would actually be a pretty good solution.
Mm-hmm.
So you have... Yeah, and then... I don't know where we're going with that, but...
Well, just rewarding you for using these mechanics, and there's a point to it. And you're right, a lot of games this. Dark Messiah, one thing, which sometimes you don't notice it, but they put these things everywhere, which is basically a bunch of barrels up on a wooden board, and has wooden supports. And you hit the wooden support, and it knocks those barrels down, and it takes out 2 enemies. And it's very rewarding to do that, and you want to use the environment. And they put there for you to use it, and I feel like certain game companies go, well, that's just kind of like, this is how you have to do it. You have to knock this down to roll on to them. And so if we put this there, they're going to do it. And then, like, I don't know, maybe that's...
I think the way you described it even fell into that.
Yeah.
You said you hit this barrel, you hit this slat, and the barrels fall down and they kill the enemies. Instead of saying, if you hit this slat, barrels will fall down and crush the enemies.
Yeah.
You see, there's a tiny difference there.
Mm-hmm.
But it does change it that the world is just a world.
Yeah, no, that's actually a big thing. So something I really noticed with the Atomic Heart game is...
The which game?
Atomic Heart. It's a new game.
Atomic Heart, yes.
Yeah, Soviet robots.
Yeah.
So they have all these mechanics and all these puzzles and these door locks which are ridiculous and convoluted and you never have them in the real world. So they have all these things. I'm looking at this and thinking, these are mechanics for the sake of mechanics, and some of them are world building. Like, there's a few things that are world building, but about 60 to 70% is mechanics, so I have game mechanics, so I check off box if I have this game mechanic. In Dark Messiah, climbing the rope is a nightmare. Like, these chains and ropes are nightmares to climb. And I don't like that mechanic. However, it makes sense that there are these ropes to climb in the game. And they're in the world, and it's there. And the barrels are there because there's barrels, and you can use them.
Do you know why you can't pet dogs in Breath of the Wild?
I thought you can.
Nope. Well, you can... I think it's possible if you're holding something, you can spin around and your hand will brush over the dog.
You can feed them, right, and then they love you.
Right, but there's a very important reason why you can feed the dogs and not pet them.
That is?
They wanted every action in the game...
To matter?
To be something that worked in all scenarios. So... When you're feeding the dog, what that is the same action of having items in your hand and throwing them. You can use that to lure enemies. You can use that to distract enemies, feed them. You can use that to cook. You can use that to feed your horse. You can use that to feed the dogs. You can use that to light stuff on fire.
That's really interesting, because by the nature of Dark Messiah being the source engine, enemies in the source engine are basically players. And so they get tired. Like, if you fight them long enough, their stamina goes down as well, and they start, like, limping off and coughing. And one of the weirdest interactions I had is there's this necromancer they have all the same spells you do. And he's trying to throw firebolts at me. And there's a group of enemies in front of him. And I ran around this big box and hid behind it. And he accidentally hit one of his allies and lit him on fire. And that fire spread to the other guard. And then that fire spread to the necromancer. And so this whole little interaction, they all took each other out because that's the rules of the game.
Yeah. So the rules always apply everywhere.
Yeah.
And so... The reason the game designers in Breath of the Wild didn't want to have a pet dog action was that would be an isolated action.
Yeah.
There was no... Now, if they had a button where you hold out your hand and you interact with things, then they would have allowed petting dogs.
Or you can pet every single entity in the game and...
But no, because that would still be a... It's not one thing. It's not the pet action. You have to have your thing be usable in... every situation interactable with every other situation. Which really makes you wonder about the Sheikah Slate roly games. But I guess it makes sense for selling the Switch. I mean, the Wii U's tablet being also something Link has control over.
Yeah.
But it also... So if they had an action which was hold out your hand, that would work. But there's only so many buttons on the Switch.
Yes.
But a hold out your hand action, you could do that you could do all sorts of things with that. Skyrim actually, a lot of its systems work in a bunch of different ways. Like if you throw a sword at someone, it's going to hurt them. Or like if you pick it up and whip it around, or if you block someone's line of view with a bucket, that's going to actually block their line of view. That's not hard coded. It's just their sight
gets blocked.
It gets blocked by this object. Or another one is you can catch arrows that are shot at you.
Yeah.
Because they're just items in the world moving really fast.
Yeah, so one of the things I noticed actually with Dark Messiah is the telekinesis spell. You can levitate up objects. And the whole idea is you levitate them up and fire them. And so the gravity gun from, what was it called?
Half-Life?
Yeah, Half-Life. It's basically the gravity gun from Half-Life. However, one of the things I found out is I levitate up a statue. And if I just jittered my mouse around, it's still a statue in the world getting moved around. Things have collision damage. And so I was basically raising the statue up and down and hitting an orc over the head with it. And it worked.
Yeah.
Because it's an object in the world. And like in other games, like, no, this only deals damage if you fire at them. But in this game, it's like, yeah, you can batter them.
Have you played Half-Life?
No.
Because I think you... Like, it's similar to Dark Messiah, so you might like that. Enjoy it. And Arx Fatalis is another game like that. And, Breath of the Wild is like that. And Prey, to an extent. And of course, Dishonored.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few games out there like that. Another one is Heat Signature.
Yeah.
I think Heat Signature is the best of them, really. I think that game's amazing.
Yeah, I quite enjoy Heat Signature. I like the Gunpoint more.
I
really like Gunpoint.
I once crashed Heat Signature by doing... I had so many swaps set up and so many interactions that I ended up, during a quest mission, which are supposed to be these little isolated things, I ended up taking over an enemy ship, like a ship that wasn't part of the mission, firing at the ship that you were supposed to actually assassinate the guy in, and then swapping places with him just before the bullet hit him or something like that, and then swapping back so that he ended up inside my ship. And I did all this and it crashed the game because the interactions were just
You're
so...
too awesome. Game's broken.
I actually sent the bug report with that. I said, sorry, I was too awesome. And I had this long list of interactions I did. Yeah. I can't remember them all, sadly, but it was like 12 things in a row I did. And there's one thing where it'll send you back to the origin point after a timer. And then I use swap positions with this guy and then swap back. And then I had teleport to this other ship. And then I had fire at myself and swap places with this guy. And I had so much going on at once. All of Thomas Biskup, I think is his name. Yeah. His games.
Oh, we're about his turn-based game.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone can pull it off, it'll be him.
Because you could argue that all of his games have been turn-based, like Gunpoint and...
Yeah, well, Floating Point isn't, but the others are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Floating Point is his first game, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, it is.
All his games are really good.
Yeah.
But it's not turn-based at all.
Yeah.
It's just like Spider-Man swinging simulator.
Yeah. It's a Flash game, isn't it?
No.
No?
I don't think so.
No.
I have it on Steam. So,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a YouTuber called Never Knows Best that you might like. He did a video on the history of immersive sims. I think it was him. It might have been Indigo Gaming. But he goes over all of them, and...
Yeah, it's not even like this... Like, I like the immersive sim, but I want the combat more, because Vampire the Masquerade's fun, but its combat has limits. Like, it definitely has limits, whereas Dark Messiah just doesn't feel like it has nearly as much. Like, even there's another game which, it's that vampire game, I can't remember what it's called, but it has some pretty fun combat.
Blood Rain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has some pretty fun combat, but even then, I feel like there's some limits, and like it doesn't have as much as the immersive sim in it. And so it's kind of the balance point between Blood Rain and Vampire the Masquerade somehow is Dark Messiah.
Yeah, games that give you...
It's not even freedom, it's just I'm actually in the world fighting them. Like, It's not I have this arena and there's these strict rules and...
Yeah, verisimilitude.
Yeah.
And that's why the chemistry system in Breath of the Wild is so good.
Yeah.
Because everything is a thing.
Yes.
Sleeping Dogs combat did something where there isn't actually organic interactions, as far as I'm aware. But they made everything, like, interact. So if you're near a balcony, you have the option to, like, throw the guy over the balcony. Yeah. Or if you're on a curb, you can curb stomp the guy. Or So it made it so that everything makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's not actually... It's always the same button. It's like, use this environmental kill, basically. But it has so many of them.
But versus, like, even the old Left 4 Dead game, or... I can't remember the other one, but Left 4 Dead... Oh, and the very old... I think it was GTA 4 or GTA 3. Like, they had some insane engines. Like, the zombies... Every part of where you hit them matters, and they actually have these AIs which are based in physics.
You mean Dead Space?
Not Dead Space. Dead Space also has that, but no, the Left 4 Dead zombies. Like, every point where you hit on their body, like if it's not the headshot, they will stumble, their arms get hurt, their shoulders get pushed. And then one of the GTA games actually had a physics system where it'd create new animations on the fly to account for what's going on in the game, which apparently made the game a really weird physics engine buggy mess. But it's also one of the best looking games in some aspects because of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
like if if they just kept pursuing that engine to make it more stable and keeping it in the game and have it run, like that would be amazing.
Or they could just re-implement that idea into their...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, just re-implement it and work on it more.
Like, GTA 5's vehicle destruction is really impressive. How whatever you hit is what gets damaged, and then you start losing, like, you lose a wheel, you lose a door, you have, like, the air resistance. Like, it's really cool. But they're I think that their fall-over animations are all the same now, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's a ragdoll.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but Left 4 Dead 2, I think, was just... That game... There's a video I saw, it's the behind the scenes, or someone made a documentary behind the scenes, and they just did so much work to make it like you're actually fighting zombies.
So, like, Dwarf Fortress as well does this, I guess. Dwarf Fortress, you can use the environment, you can do... So there's a game that, Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode, that'll give you the combat you want. And also NetHack has a lot of...
I need to see it. I need to see it.
Okay, Slaves to Our Muck. It's 3D, and it has an incredibly in-depth combat system. Have you ever played Slaves to Our Muck?
No.
Oh, it's got Dwarf Fortress's combat system, but it's all 3D. It's an open world 3D game.
Is it all ASCII?
No. They're 3D models.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Dwarf Fortress is actually called Slaves to Our Muck 2. Slaves to Our Muck 1 was a 3D open world game with incredibly in-depth combat.
And it needs to be real time.
Well, it's not real time.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There's other games out there, and I'm trying to think of them. They'll come to me later, but shall we?
Well, I don't need other games. I'm playing that one right now.
No, I'm just thinking, like, it's a fairly rare genre, and I'm always on the lookout for them. There's a lot of new indie games that try to do this, like I said, like Dad Quest. Yeah. Dad Quest as well. If you cut off a creature's leg, then it starts hopping, and if you cut off its arm, it'll headbutt you. And
I actually saw a recent thing on Dead Space. Mandalore Game his review on the new one. I had no idea Dead Space had the bodies, like you slowly take, like I knew it had the idea if you want to cut off the limbs, but I had no idea it had like skin layer, muscle layer, bone layer. And it's like you want to flamethrower off their skin layer, so expose the muscles, and then you can like cut through them, and then you want to like use impact to break the bones. And
there's some amazingly clever games out there. It also like they didn't want a UI, so everything is on the character. Yeah. Like his health.
Also, just something I really like about the Dead Space conceptually is, so we have these entirely different enemies that the conventional space gun doesn't work on, but industrial mechanical tools of the future, like industrial mechanic tools right now are terrifying. So what will future ones be like? Well, they're great for causing accidents in these horrible aliens.
I guess it goes into that, this is related to, you're saying modern games are missing something that you found in Dark Messiah. Yeah. And Dead Space is a good example of that, I think, because the re-release has redone certain visual elements to account for the politics of the developers or the company. Yeah. So they've changed the bathrooms to gender-neutral bathrooms. They've lambasted capitalism in the graffiti in certain areas. Yeah. And I don't know if Mandalore goes over this stuff at all.
He doesn't cover that at all.
The Diablo games also did this, where they got rid of all the naked women in the remake. Yeah. And the Where's Waldo got rid of... Yeah. We talked about this, I think, on the podcast. Got rid of the fat people. Road Doll recently is the worst case I've seen yet. Yeah. Well, the getting rid of all Arabs was pretty bad in Where's Waldo. Yeah. But yeah, Road Doll, they have... So there's something I think everyone knows this, but you might not recognize it consciously, like it might be a subconscious thing. A lot of writing has rhythm. Yeah. So you might add a word to a sentence as a writer, especially a poet, but you might add a word, like a superfluous word even, in order to make the rhythm of the sentence flow better, or be more fun to say. And Road Doll was a master of rhythm. And so even if these edits were acceptable, like even if this censorship was acceptable, right? Yeah. I was reading the list and comparing them. They actually destroy the rhythm of a lot of his sentences.
So rhythm-wise, I'm reading a book right now, which is that Viking book. And one thing that sort of messes with me is a lot of time he'll use the same word in a row of a description, or like he just uses a word twice or three times. And maybe it's just me that I don't like it because in my own writing I'll see I accidentally do it, and so I always have to like have an interplace in between using that word again.
Yeah.
And so is that a common thing for writing? Or...
Yeah. That's. I think that's typically a sign that it wasn't edited.
Yeah.
Because it's when the word comes into your mind, it becomes the right word for every situation.
Yeah.
And so your first draft is going to be like that, and then you go back and you edit it.
And so because it's just it gets to me sometimes. Like every once in a while, just in that book, he'll use the same descriptive like 3 times. And
so you'll notice when you read, I've been reading a lot of serial web novels recently.
Yeah.
And they do it all the time because they're written on the fly.
Yeah.
So they haven't edited it. Yeah. It's definitely something that people edit out typically.
Yeah.
So
I don't even do it in the first place. Like just when I'm purposely writing, I have to maneuver my way around that, or I feel slightly ill.
You have to. It depends on the situation, of course.
Yes.
But sometimes to actually write anything, you just have to let it be and keep going.
Sometimes there isn't another word, or sometimes it is the right word.
Or what I mean is, sometimes you just have to let bad writing lie and just finish your book.
Yeah.
Because if you spend all your time correcting... For instance, my book had an entire massive character that I got rid of in the second edit. And if I'd spent half my time getting their descriptors down perfectly, that would have all been wasted work.
Yes.
Because they're just out of there. Same with, in Harry Potter, there was going to be Gary, I think was his name, right? Who was going to be the 4th member of their crew.
Really?
I showed you the picture of him, remember?
I don't.
Okay, well, I'll show you the picture after the podcast. But yeah, there was supposed to be Hermione, Ron, Harry, and like Gary or something like that. Or maybe his name was... I think it was Gary, but... Or Huey or something like that.
This is like the extra guy in Wheel of Time.
Yeah. And, they actually wrote like a ways into the book with these characters.
Yeah.
Wheel of Time, I think he even wrote the first book or something, and his wife was like, no, you got to get rid of that character. He's the same as the others.
And so he got fused into the other 3.
Yeah. And Gary became Seamus, I think, and then became a side character. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Seamus is one of the more notable side characters. Him and Neville, obviously.
Yeah.
And Luna. But Seamus is like their roommate, so he's much... Yeah, and they got rid of him. But there's artwork of him in front of Fluffy with the others trying to like get down into the trapdoor.
Huh. I never knew about this.
I'm pretty sure I showed you the picture of him.
I don't remember any of this.
Yeah. I'll show you the picture after. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why you don't want to work to death the exact details while you're doing the first draft.
Yeah.
On the second draft, go all ham, of course. But
yeah.
So yeah, what's going on here though with Roald Dahl is you're removing all the edge. Like some of the stuff they're doing, like they changed sons to daughters. They get rid of all gendered language where possible. Like, oh, it's not mother, it's parents. Or one of the funny ones is like, witches are nasty creatures. They're bald, unlike you or I. And then it was changed to some women wear wigs, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. It was such a blatant thing. And then there was another one where this is one of the really nasty ones. It was like, warning, do not feed this to your pets. Side effects may include your dog exploding. And then they changed that to, this will make your dog hop like a flea. It's like, wow. And they do stuff like, they changed think about they changed Matilda reading Rudyard Kipling to her reading Jane Austen. And it could be because Rudyard Kipling was probably, as far as I'm aware, he's the first person to really hate SJWs on Earth.
Rudyard Kipling's writing is amazing.
He's my favorite poet.
Yeah.
And
also, the Slow Regard of Silent Things.
Yeah.
So you know that book. That book, there's something different about that book. Like, reading it, it's one of my favorite short stories. Like, it's not even a story. I don't know what it is, but...
It's a work of literary art.
So imagine editing that thing.
For modern sensibilities.
Yeah, like, even if it doesn't have problems, just, like, trying to, like, go in there and change stuff about that book, like, it'd be attacking a painting with, like, a felt pen to censor it.
There's any...
Like, I know certain books is like, it's just like the author trying to get the story out. But that book there, and probably Roald Dahl to an extent, like, every single word almost is laid out to be a part of the total whole.
So the Telegraph article, or one of them that reported on the Roald Dahl censorship, interviewed, or at least quotes an interview of Roald Dahl's editor, I think.
Yeah.
And like his original editor. And the guy was saying that Roald Dahl he'd write his book and he'd send it to his editors and they'd say, okay, here's a bunch of changes we want. And okay, this is offensive to adults. And this is, we don't use this word anymore, use this word and that sort of thing. And Roald Dahl would get it back. And he would just say, no, I'm not changing that. No, I'm not changing that. No, I'm not changing that. And he's like, yeah, this is offensive to adults, but not to children. And I'm writing for children.
Yeah.
And then, or there would be a section where they would say, okay, this isn't the word we use anymore. Like, it's not even like, oh, I'm offended. It's just, we don't use this word anymore. It's like, yeah, but school children use this word. And so Roald Dahl chose his words very precisely and very carefully.
Something like that apparently happened with Tolkien, actually, where he sent his book off to be edited, and the editor did a bunch of things, and they gave it back. And Tolkien's like, did you not understand what I wrote here? That this whole thing is to explain this part of the world. And by you wanting to change that things, you completely ruin all these other things. And so he'd like write these massive essays to send back to the editor, and the editor would go, okay, right.
In They Don't Care About Us, Michael Jackson's song.
Yeah.
The remastered version you can find on YouTube actually edits the lyrics very slightly.
Oh.
And I was talking to our mom about it because the words they changed in the context were offensive words. Like one of the lines is, I think it's "Jew me, screw me," and I didn't even know what "Jew me" meant. So I had to ask our mom, and she said, "Jew me" was a term saying like cheat me, like that's basically treat me like a Jew would treat me sort of thing. So It's like, oh, this person Jewed me, they gave me a bad deal, and so they got rid of that word. And there's another one, kick me, kike me, and I don't actually know what kike means. Apparently it's offensive. And I was saying, okay, so this is actually offensive. Like it's not just moralizing. Like this is literally offensive. But this is a song about black people being horribly mistreated by the system. And I'm not saying, oh, my suffering justifies me being racist to someone else or whatever it might be, right? But no, what it's saying is this song is not meant to be unoffensive.
Yeah.
This is an offensive song.
Yes.
You can't, the very fact that even if Michael Jackson was wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have been written that way for proper people would have never written this song.
Yes.
You can't go and change his works because it was meant to be offensive.
I'm just imagining right now.
You're taking the teeth out of the lion.
You know the London Museum?
Yeah.
There's just a guy in the London Museum. He's got a paintbrush. And he's putting bras and pants and like underwear or fig leaves onto all the artwork.
Yes, the Pope did that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are angry about that Pope doing that. He fig leafed a bunch of people.
Yeah. Yeah, that was done.
Yeah.
And we now look back and we say, I can't believe you destroyed this priceless art.
Yeah.
Like with your fleeting temporary sensibilities that nobody had before that time and nobody has after.
Yeah.
You went and destroyed some of the greatest works of art humanity has ever produced.
Mm-hmm.
And Roald Dahl is one of those figures.
Yes.
He is one of the greatest writers humanity has ever produced. And you're going in and destroying his stuff.
And some people, I think it was the Low Seers, talked about the Roald Dahl thing. Mm-hmm. And one of them said, like, who's next? Are they going to go after Tolkien's works?
Like...
And like the state has to protect them, and there's like...
It's hard to go up from Roald Dahl. Like, Tolkien and J.K. Rowling, that's all you have left, really.
Yeah.
Maybe Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
I think I might put Roald Dahl above Terry Pratchett, though. I'm not sure. They're close.
But that is something to note, like, attacking Tolkien. It is amazing. Tolkien actually achieved partly what he wanted to do, of giving England a mythos. He gave modern fantasy to the world through his writing.
But Roald Dahl as well, right?
Yeah, Roald Dahl gave... Yeah, no, he definitely gave...
No, but Roald Dahl fought for the UK.
Yes.
Like, he was a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And this is how you repay the person that protected your country, is you destroy his work. Well, it's Netflix, right? So an American company comes in and destroys a hero.
Yeah.
And Tolkien was a war hero as well, right? Well, he's not a hero exactly, but I mean, all soldiers are heroes, right?
Yeah.
Like
he, I think his position was like he suffered shell shock. He was one of the soldiers who had really bad shell shock.
A lot of them do,
and he had injuries, and so he was sent back home to like be in the hospital because they weren't certain what to do with shell shock at the time. in World War One. He had shell shock and a leg injury. The leg injury healed. The shell shock didn't. And because he was a professor of linguists, I believe that they managed to make it so his shell shock got him honorably discharged. And he's like one of the very few people who actually didn't have the catch-22 of the shell shock.
Yeah, and then there's Roald Dahl. Well, I mean,
his life story.
Well, he nearly died many times. Like, he was in multiple plane crashes, I think it was. I think it was 2 plane crashes.
Yeah.
And as he was, like, horribly injured for months on end, lying in the hospital, unable to move, his mom phoned him up and was saying, like, oh, wow, this is horrible. I hope you're doing better. I'm glad you're doing better. And just phoned him up and said, like, wow, you're such a hero. Good for you, that sort of thing.
Mm.
What he didn't realize until much later was she was on her deathbed.
Yeah.
And that was her last phone call. And she completely didn't talk about it. She was just like, wow, I'm glad you're doing better. I'm good. And
yeah.
So it's just this, I think that was his stepmom, actually. I don't think his mom was.
But yeah, no, like, attacking Roald Dahl's works, like, our teacher, we both mutually had, read those stories to us, and our parents read those stories.
Shakespeare. That's someone that's up there, too.
Yes.
So, okay, so first you go for Waldo, right? This is British great works. You go for Waldo, and then you get away with that. Then you go for Roald Dahl. You get away with that. Next they come for Pratchett. And then if they get away with that, then they're going for Tolkien. If they get away with that, they're going for Shakespeare. If they get away with that, they're going for the best writer in all of time, Rowling herself. They're going to go and take her.
I mean, as long as she's alive, they're going to have a lot of trouble doing anything to her works.
Well, that's the nice thing. But that's the thing. Roald Dahl as well. He would have fought back against this. So here's the thing. Here's a lesson for Rowling.
There's a different author. Waiting for Godot. Do you know the play?
Sounds familiar.
Waiting for Godot. It's basically your worst nightmare incarnate, actually. I believe there's two people basically stuck in a house, I think.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for someone to show up, and he's not.
I have one of those nightmares last night.
Yeah. But I think that's what the story's about. I'm not 100% certain. But the author of the play, the playwright, said, all actors in this play must be men.
Yeah.
And he's dead now.
Yeah.
And his son is under control of the thing. And there was a play done recently, and so people in the background were women, they're doing all this stuff, but all the actors were men. And because that they have this caveat, the play, it's a very popular play, it's apparently very well written, was cancelled. And people want to, like, change up his, like, one rule. Like, even the way the play is written, like, someone was saying, if you want to have women in this play, the play would have to be pure women. You have to have, like, one solid gender in this play. And then I think it was Brett Weinstein talking to his wife. And he said, no, it still wouldn't work because a bunch of the jokes and a bunch of the things in this play are actually very much based around men. And so the play talks that.
So Rowling's still alive.
Yeah.
So what she needs to do, and hopefully she's put this in place, is so Tolkien, Roald Dahl's estate or whoever was in control, Penguin or someone, they were, treating him decent. And then they sold the rights to Netflix. So what... And then Netflix, like, ruined it. And I think Penguin still has some sort of hold. So it's Penguin's fault as well, possibly. So Rowling needs to set in stone some way of saying, when I am dead, this is free of copyright. Or something along the lines of, any changes to my work not done by me, release all previous works from copyright. Like, you need to set up some contingency like that to protect your work for all of time. Because the problem right now is people can't even go back for the old Roald Dahl stuff because they still don't have any rights to it, even though this new work is totally different. It's a different work. And, free market, you can say, well, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the rose without thorns that isn't even a rose? Or do you prefer the actual... This is what I was talking about when I was talking about roses have thorns a while back, is you need an edge in things in order for them to feel something.
Yeah, food needs salt.
This is actually, I think, the core of suffering and the core, potentially, of what causes all this cluster B stuff we were talking about before. And this is something I've only come across really recently, and it's incredibly important, I think. I want to give an example. It's very personal, so I'm trying to figure out how to do it. But before that... pain is supposed to hurt.
Yes.
So I think there's something where you're in a lot of pain. And so you keep looking for solutions. Like, okay, this self-help book, this person, I'll listen to Jordan Peterson. He'll give me the advice, or whoever it might be, right? This guru, this whatever. All you're doing is trying to avoid the pain. You have to go through the pain at some point.
Yeah.
Pain is supposed to hurt. At some point, you have to suffer. I haven't read Kierkegaard, but apparently one thing he said was despair. You have to despair.
Yeah.
And I think this is very true. So what Jung said about anxiety, or he called it psychosis.
Yeah.
He said, so psychosis is caused by you not addressing the problems in your life. So it's like, okay, I'm really anxious. The reason you're anxious is because you haven't come to bear with how horrible your life is.
Yeah.
And so his cure, this might explain the idea better, is his cure. So his cure for psychosis is that you need to turn and face your problems.
Yeah.
So the problem with that, right, that doesn't make your life better. That makes you aware of how absolutely horrible your life is. But the only way you can actually do anything about that is to actually see how horrible your life is, feel that pain, suffer, mourn the life you lost, and then make a change.
Yeah, you have to look into the mirror.
So he said, if your problem is with the outer world, the cure is to integrate. You have to become a member of the culture and society. So you have to do everything that everyone else is doing. You have to dress like everyone else. You have to get a job. You have to have a wife. You have to have a child. If your problem is outer, you have to integrate. If your problem is inner, you have to individuate. You have to follow your authentic self. You have to do what you believe is true. You have to follow that no matter what, no matter who you lose along the way. And that's like the answer to everything, actually. Like, it's what I find crazy is that Jung solved everything.
The problem with the outer world, I very much have this concept in my brain of how dare you impose your will onto the world and expect it to shift. Like that thought of you have a problem with the world, and so the whole world must change around you.
Well, the solution is to integrate. You have a problem with the inner world. You're depressed. You're angry. You're you feel
lost
potential. The problem is anxiety is often a sign that you're just not looking at your actual problems. But I think it often does point to the inner world problem. The solution there is to uncompromisingly individuate.
Yeah.
And you can do both. You can have both problems at once, and you can solve both at once. It's like, okay, I need to dress like everyone else in the suit and tie, let's say, if we're in the 20s. But I also need to actively pursue this thing that's way out. I have to become a strip dancer because that's my truest, most authentic self. Right? Like, if that's what you have to do, you have to do that.
Yeah.
Now I don't know. That's probably not most people's authentic self, but it might be. You have to listen. You have to pay attention. And I think Jordan Peterson's argument for God might actually be, after listening to him with a talk recently, that the very fact that you can say someone isn't living to their authentic self is proof of God. Because you should have no idea what someone else's authentic self is.
Yeah. Huh.
And
one of the things...
but I'm not confident you actually do know still. But
from 12 Rules of Life, there's this one point where he talks... I think it's in... I can't remember which rule it is, but it's basically... so you need to clean your room. It might be the clean your room. Where there's a pile of paperwork. And you say to yourself, hey... I know we've had me and you're talking to yourself, but we really need to get this desk clean. But it's far too much effort for you to do that. So I'm going to clean up this stack of papers. And if we do that, I'm going to reward you with espresso, because you like coffee. Yeah, I like coffee. So we'll clean this up and we'll get espresso.
Yeah.
And the part of you goes, what? Really? You'll do this for me? We'll have this exchange? And it's like this sort of, I imagine this hopeful little mouse basically poking up out of a hole. It's like, what? Really? And it's like, yeah. And so... you make that deal with yourself. Then you clean up that piece of paper, and then you don't do more. You don't go, I can keep clean. No,
you stop.
You stop.
And the other important thing is, you might be thinking, I shouldn't have to bribe myself to do something. It's like, what the hell do you know? That's his exact words.
Yeah. It's like, so you go get that coffee, you enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I've been doing that, and it works. It works really well because if I want to buy a game or I want to get some music, the thing is, it's very tricky to come up with the rewards. That's where I struggle.
Yeah.
So
no, I struggle with that too.
my rule is roughly $1 worth of things. So it has to be a game on sale or something, right? Yeah. And also my rule, and I think this is a good one, is I'm not allowed to combine rewards.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to save up 10 rewards for a $10 something.
Yeah.
Because I think that then encourages you to always save.
Yes.
And you have to spend the reward as soon as you get it, basically.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not spending. I have like 7 backed up right now. But what that means is the moment a game's on sale for $1, it's mine. I'm buying it. The moment I find a song I want, I buy it.
Yeah.
So even if I'm not spending the reward immediately, that reward is not allowed to be combined with other rewards, and it's immediately transactable. You're also not allowed to be tricky and say, well, my reward will be to spend my other 3 rewards on a bigger thing. So I'm breaking the... No, you can't do that. And the problem is, like, his route, it doesn't have to be monetary, right? Like, it can be something else. And he gives an example of, a coffee, or take the afternoon off and watch an hour of television, or something like that. The problem I have with those rewards, for me, it's different for every person, right?
Yeah.
I should already be doing what I want to be doing.
Yes.
And I don't feel good eating stuff I wouldn't otherwise eat.
Yes.
So like, I'll have a piece of...
It's not a real reward.
Like, I'll have a bar of ice cream. That isn't what you kids eat these days, bars of ice cream. What are they called? Scoop of ice cream.
A candy floss.
Eating a scoop of ice cream isn't going to make me feel better. It's not actually a reward.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's very tricky for me to actually come up with a reward. And I think music's a good just buying a song. I think that's a pretty good reward. And buying a game that I otherwise... Because there's the other problem is there's some games it's like, I just want this.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to be that I can never do anything nice for myself now. I have to do something ahead of time, right?
Yes.
So what it is typically, okay, this game looks experimental. I probably won't play it for more than an hour, but it's $1. I'll give it a shot. That's the sort of zone I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
So my wish list has expanded from 50 curated games to like 200 because it's like, here's some stuff if it goes down to $1. Just snap it up and see what it's like. And I think stuff like that.
Yeah, but just that little thing of you actually do have to talk with yourself, and there's something going on there is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, so the other thing Jung said, and this is to do with the inner self, right?
Yeah.
Is if you do what is authentic and important, so you're living truth, absolutely. You're doing exactly what you want to do and what is authentic and important. And it's, when I say what you want to do, I mean what your soul says you need to do this. It's not actually want exactly, but it is want. It is, at its base it is want, but it's not, I'm doing everything I want, so I'm eating tons of candy or something and sleeping in all day. No, this is what I was, even without a religious connotation, this is what I was put on earth to do.
Yeah.
So to serve God is actually to do this. It's the same thing.
Yes. It's to do
white
magic, right?
It's to do white magic. If you say to God, grant me the strength to be your greatest servant, what you're saying is, let me be true to myself.
Yes.
It doesn't mean I want to be a priest. It actually means I will be the best goddamn stripper you've ever seen.
You know, the goddamn on that.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for noticing. But that's what serving God means.
Yeah.
And what Jung said, paraphrased, was, if you do what is authentic and important, it'll take you to the place you least want to go.
Yeah.
Not it'll make your life better, and it'll take you to the place you least want to go.
No, I've struggled with that actually a lot.
Yeah, I think everyone does. It's hell. It's scary.
Well,
it's painful, and you have to feel pain.
For me, I think you probably know this. I struggle a lot with you probably have troubles too, but I struggle a lot with the diet of there are certain foods that I can't have because they mess with me. But I really like eating. And that's something I recognize. People used to make fun of me for it to a certain extent, and it's there was this time where we went to this. It was with Japanese exchange students came up here, and we went to a coffee shop to have lunch. And the people who ran the coffee shop knew me quite well, and so they had sandwiches prepared for everyone. And they prepared 3 sandwiches for me because they knew I would eat them and enjoy them and have them all. And I ate a lot of food. And so I have this dual struggle of I really do like food and like eating things, but they make me feel quite ill and miserable. And this cold I have was partly extended by having that trouble. And then on top of that, it's like when I'm not sick or hurting myself by eating this food, I have noticed that I become far more productive. I'm far more able to do things. Like my sleep's better as well, so it's not even like I exhaust myself. But when I'm in the state of like eating miserably and not being able to do things, I don't know, I have this fear of being that productive person, because that productive person can mess up more or something. I don't know the complete analysis of it, but like they can fail more because they're doing more. And it's just, even in fact, they're doing more, so they're existing more, and I want to exist less when I'm in that state. And when I'm out of the state, it's like, oh, why would I ever think I want to exist less? Because existing more is far better. And I don't regret existing more.
So that's what you're exactly describing there then is the fear of pain. Because, okay, I'll tell the personal story because I feel like it wouldn't be fair if I didn't. So, how do I even get into it?
I mean, it's all up to a person's openness. Like,
No, but I think this is very related. So, I was talking to our mom about a person, and the person I've talked about before, actually, on the podcast, I regret not asking out to prom, right?
Yeah.
And I was talking to our mom about her on a totally different subject, but she's like, "Oh, I don't remember who that is. Who's that?" So I was like, "Okay, oh, I think I have a picture of her somewhere." So I showed her I pulled up the picture, and it blew me away. I was like, "Holy cow, she is so beautiful!" And what was crazy about that was the first time I've ever thought that. And you might think, "Wait, why would you want to ask out this person if you've never thought that?" Right?
Yeah.
It's like, weren't you pursuing a relationship with this person? What do you mean that's the first time you've ever thought? And I don't mean that's the first time I've ever thought that about her. This is the first time I've thought that about anyone, basically, since I was very young, I think. I think I did used to think this when I was younger. And what I'm pretty certain was the case here was, by thinking that, I was like, because once I thought that, I had this moment of, like, mourning of, like, you idiot, you let that go.
Yeah.
And as long as you don't say this person's beautiful, then you don't have to lose them.
Yeah.
You don't have to say that person is a ray of sunshine and you're never going to see them again. Like, you don't have to admit that. But what you have to do, if you want to see beauty, you have to feel pain.
Yeah, and so roses have thorns.
Yeah, because even if it had worked great with her, right? Mm-hmm. I had to take that risk. I had to say, okay, this is a person that if I admit that they are beautiful, it is very possible that I will never see them again.
Yeah.
And so in order to actually feel beauty the pain comes before the beauty.
Yes. Now
in order to sniff this rose, I have to take the risk that it will sting me.
See, you're saying that from that perspective. I'm coming from the perspective, I've been stung twice.
Yeah.
On that, of the person, like, they were my friend, and I was like, well, I'm just going to throw it out there. And both times got rejected.
Yeah.
2 different people. And still friends with both of them. That's the case there. And no longer quite as much have the feelings. I don't know if they completely go away, but it's like they're rejected, so I'll respect that. But it's a very destroying thing.
It's not even
If they say no, then there's never the chance of it.
No, it's not the rejection that's the issue. It's the... So here's... Because there's people I've asked out, right?
Yeah.
But I never said, oh, they're so beautiful. And so what's going on here is... I think my solution was... So these people, beauty, and it's not about rejection. You ever have your brain shift modes? Like you actually feel different in your head all of a sudden?
Yes.
Very disconcerting. Right. Holding someone at arm's length while pulling them towards you as hard as you can, and they don't come towards you for some reason. Yeah. That's what it is. This is the same thing when I applied for jobs, I think. It's like, this is how I got injured. In a ergonomic sense, but I think it applies emotionally to a lot of things, is you have something as far away from you as possible, your keyboard, right?
Yeah.
And you're typing as hard as you can. Instead of moving up and relaxing and getting to an ergonomic position, it's the same thing. It's, I will keep this beauty as far away as possible from me, while desiring it so much that I'm pulling on it with all my might, and it's not moving for some reason. And that is anxiety. That is, you are not willing to face the pain.
Yes.
And so you are destroying yourself. And so what you do is you come up with every solution under the sun. My solution, I think, was in part to take that beauty for myself. So I say, I will create beautiful things. I will be the beautiful one. I will, like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Never give it to anyone else. It's like, okay, I'm not going to let that near me. That's my many solutions. And none of them work. You just feel more and more sad and anxious and confused. And this is a little thing. Like this isn't actually something that bothered me that much. And so, right, this thing. But it applies to everything in life, is avoiding the pain, which does matter to me much more. This was just me this is me finally seeing one facet of something and saying this applies to everything, and the whole structure starts to crumble, and I'm like, oh my, that is amazing. Like it was actually, I started feeling so good. Like I was mourning, and I was feeling so good, and I was like, okay, this can't last, right? Like, you know, all good things come to an end, right? I was like, this can't last. And then I started feeling like later in the day, I was like, yeah, okay, it faded, yeah. Or maybe I've gotten used to this level of happiness. And then a few hours later, I was just smiling randomly. I was like, wait, no, it hasn't faded. And then the next day I was like, okay, it's over. I was like, no, it's not. It was amazing how important it was to feel that pain. And it was just like, but there was no solution but to feel that pain.
Yes.
I dreamed a dream of what could have been, and when I woke, I cried. And had I not left the dream of what was to my sadness and sorrow... Sorry, no. Had I not left myself to my sadness and sorrow, the dream of what was could have survived. So I dreamed a dream of what could have been, and when I woke, I cried. Had I not left myself to my sadness and sorrow, the dream of what was could have survived. You ignore everything that is good right now because you're still running from the pain of the past, and but pain is supposed to hurt, and you can't think yourself out of it. You just have to mourn. And this ties into what I want to talk about today.
All right.
A little bit, and we can come back to this broader theme of pain, but we talked about forgiveness last time, and we didn't come to any sort of resolution. So I did a bunch of reading on forgiveness and watching videos on forgiveness. And I watched Aiden Paladin, which is great because that's basically...
no opinions, just statistics.
Yeah, well, it's basically reading, but she's doing the reading for you.
Yes.
Because she just gives you like 20 studies and says, I don't... like.
This is a conclusion.
I think she's like highly autistic or something. Like actually, to the point where she doesn't understand things that aren't data. Like, I actually think that, like, she says, well, I need to see a study on this, like, stuff like that, right? And so I think she's kind of great for that, because then she's like, well, let's look at the data and see what it says. And the data on forgiveness is all over the place. And I think there's actually a very simple answer for that. But it does seem to suggest that people who forgive are happier and healthier and less anxious. However, what the isolation of that seems to be is not that forgiveness makes you healthier and happier and less anxious.
As people are healthier and less anguish, forgive.
Yes. And...
oh, that is an interesting one.
So I wrote this, I was writing up, like, you can see here, I've got some paragraphs on it. Just as I was thinking about it, I had all these ideas I was thinking of them. I read Psychology Today, where they talked about forgiveness and why you should forgive. And I realized that they got it wrong, because they conflated forgiveness with mercy. And as we talked about, you cannot forgive people. You forgive behaviors.
Yes.
When you say, forgive me...
for I have sinned?
No, when you go to someone, you say, please forgive me.
Yeah.
What you're actually saying, you're not saying, forgive me my weakness.
Forgive me my transgressions?
No, you're saying, forgive me this weakness.
Oh.
Or forgive me my transgression.
Yeah.
Not my transgressions. You don't get a blanket pass. So here's the other thing about forgiveness.
Well, I'm thinking about the Lord's Prayer of... Fine, help you, daily bread. Forgive us of our sins.
As we forgive those who... Yeah, so forgive us our transgressions, as we forgive those who's
transgressed against you.
Yes. But it's not, forgive me my weakness.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in the Lord's Prayer, you're asking God for forgiveness as well. But beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness at its core is a financial term, right? It's not about mercy.
Yeah.
If someone's in debt to you, so they said forgiveness isn't the same as moving on, because moving on is cold and forgiveness is warm. And they're wrong, because it can be very cold to forgive a debt. Yeah. You say, this guy owes me $1,000. It would take me $2,000 to sue him for it. I'm forgiving the debt. I'm never giving him another loan.
Yeah.
That's that. Okay. Now that, you can forgive money, right? Like, you can just decide, okay, fine, he doesn't owe me.
Yes.
You cannot forgive actions. I don't think you can. And so I looked to the cult leader again, Teal Swan, who may or may not be a cult leader. I'm not sure. There's a lot of slander about her, like I said, so it's hard to say. And what she said struck me as true. And sometimes things are just so self-evidently true that you have to go with them. So what she said is that you cannot choose to forgive. She said, forgiveness, you do not forgive to heal. Forgiveness is a side effect of healing. You only forgive once you have already healed. So it's the same as jumping up and down on a broken leg doesn't fix it. Jumping down on that up and down on the leg is a sign that your leg has healed. So people say, well, look, all the healthy leg people jump up and down on their legs. Therefore, you have a broken leg, you should jump up and down on your leg to fix it. So the other thing she said, and this hurt me, and I think it should, obviously, telling someone to forgive another person is emotional abuse. Because they can't. And so you are going to a victim and saying to them, this is your fault. You need to be... And I think it's a thing that a lot of like the spiritual enlightenment garbage does as well.
Well, I'm just wondering, did Christ at any point actually say you should forgive people, or did he just say turn the other cheek? Because he was the Redeemer, but
so
he's the Son of God, so he's already over it.
He said, God forgive them, they know not what they do, when they crucified him.
Yeah.
And the other thing, with the turn the other cheek, apparently, Aidan Paladin talked about this, I believe, is that expression. So a Roman, you disagree with a Roman, the way that Romans expressed their displeasure with you was they'd slap you. So if you displease me, I open hand slap you. That hits your left cheek, right?
Yeah.
If you're a slave, you're not worthy of that. I'm going to backhand you. That hits your right cheek. So turn the other cheek means you turn your head so I can only hit your left cheek. So I have to treat you as an equal.
Ah. Okay.
So it doesn't say prevent the beating. It says force them to treat you as an equal. Potentially. I've heard that's what it said. I find a lot of these actuallys are actually wrong.
Yeah, I'm just... Because the very much he's the Redeemer, but he's the Son of God, so he can redeem you. It
doesn't matter what Jesus said, because the Bible is translated, and it's often translated wrong. All this stuff is translated, it's often translated wrong. Like meek. We often misuse that word.
Yeah.
As weak. It's not the same.
But even now, I'm not... The statement, what would Jesus do? That sort of
He's
joke
Christ
statement.
the Redeemer, not Christ the Forgiver.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What would Jesus do? That statement of, like, there is a model of the Son of God. And so, yeah, the Redeemer that does...
Christ forgave everyone because he was already over it.
Yes.
But that's not what a normal human can do.
Yeah.
And that person has to heal. You cannot jump to the ending. Like I said, you can't jump up and down on your leg. Christ heals instantly. You break his leg, he heals instantly. He jumps up and down.
Yeah.
Jump up and down didn't heal Christ's leg.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this like spiritual self-help nonsense, meditation and that other stuff I hate so much, like that sort of sphere, is looking at what the people are doing who are better or who are healthy.
So we're looking at all the people jumping up and down on their legs and thinking that will fix our broken leg.
Yeah.
We're looking at the finger and not the moon. Yes,
and what these spiritual people are doing furthermore is they're blaming all these people. They're saying, hey, you're injured, that's your fault. Hey, your emotions hurt, that's your fault. You need to do better. You need to be... It's not take responsibility. That's different. This is saying... You need to do this impossible task. I will smash you against this wall that you will never get through until you get through it. And you can't, because you cannot forgive. It comes naturally. Forgiving doesn't make you a better person. Becoming a better person lets you forgive. And you cannot tell someone...
Just do the greatest form of vengeance.
Live well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, or get revenge, if that makes you feel better.
Well, I think but living well is the greatest form of vengeance, I think.
Maybe. So one of the studies Aidan Paladin looked at was the results of revenge.
Yeah. And
only the minority of people felt bad about revenge. And about 30 or 40% said it made them feel great and help and got rid of their problem. And there is an aspect. So Gandhi said an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen some people say that was the worst thing Gandhi ever said. Or one of them. Because
people have two eyes.
No, because it sounds very catchy. Yeah. You know, it's catchy. It must be true.
It rhymes. Well, it doesn't rhyme, but still.
But an eye for an eye makes people afraid of taking your eye.
Yeah.
And it stops.
Yeah.
Hammurabi would not have gotten along with Gandhi.
No. Well, even the Christians...
you don't just let people walk over you.
Yeah, the Christians, you don't let people walk over, but vengeance is mine is nothing I can do to you will compare to what God's vengeance is.
Well, it's that, but it's also you can't get vengeance. Like you can only hurt yourself. I think is part of it. Like
that's part of it. But if we go for like, you can interpret the Bible many ways.
Yeah.
And so one interpretation of vengeance is mine is God's got you handled. There is vengeance in it. Like the very annoying, self-righteous Christian who's like, you're going to burn in hell. Like that sort of like, ha 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 sort of thing, that they've gotten their vengeance.
Yeah.
And they don't have to slap you.
Yeah, no, it's a great the Christians have great systems built in.
Yeah, like that system is, you don't need the weird guild because that person's going to burn in hell, and you have your vengeance.
Yeah, you're already happy to go. You're like, yeah, this person's going to hell. I feel great.
Yeah.
So a commenter on a YouTube video, Sovereign Life, said, I realized 15 years ago that I could not force forgiveness, and I stopped trying. I wanted to focus on healing my pain because that's what I really wanted. Because that's why people, it's like, oh, I'll forgive to feel better. It's like, no, that doesn't work. And so this person's like, okay, I'll just try to feel better instead. I'll do what I can there. I wanted to achieve the place where it no longer mattered what they had done because it no longer controlled my happiness. So I remember it was New Year's a couple of years ago, and our dad was saying like, so what are your plans? It's like, well, arms are injured, so I'll see what I can do. And he's like, well, maybe you can be in control of that. And it's like, no, sometimes you just got to feel the pain and pay for your mistakes. Like I was stupid. I messed up my arms. Now it is true that exercise and whatnot can help, but that doesn't mean I'm in complete control of everything.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I have to whine and cower. Like you can be a stoic and say, okay, I'm not in control of this, but I am in control of how I react to it.
Yes.
That's very different from saying, I'm not in control of this, therefore I have no responsibility. That's a very different statement.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm saying, I'm not in control of when my arms heal. That doesn't mean I don't have any responsibility.
Yeah. I was going for a walk on the creek, because I do that now. It's clear enough to walk on it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, like you're saying, you look at the guru, like that, not the guru who's trying to sell you something, but the guru who is without stress or without worry. And it's like, oh, that person's life is whatever.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. So worry tells you there's something in your life that needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
Now, living without worry can be really bad because your house can fall on you because you don't worry about it, and so you never repair it, and so the house falls on you and you die.
Maybe. I think that... So this goes back to Jung again. If you worry, then you don't know what you don't know, right? But if you pay attention, you look at your house.
Yeah.
You say, okay, it's structurally sound. Or, okay, this thing's falling apart. So I think fear might be good to have, because everything's terrifying. But let's say anxiety. So worry's fine. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Worry's fine. Anxiety means you're not worrying, right?
Yeah.
So the relief of authenticity is not the relief of safety.
Yeah.
Because if you're authentic, you're not safe. You're in the worst place ever, right? That's what I said. Like, if you're authentic, it'll place you to the place you least want to go. That's what Jung said. But it's the relief of knowing you're surrounded by wolves rather than by dragon demons.
Yeah. Well, so the thought I was having while I was going for a walk is, so this person doesn't... It's not that they're, like, not worrying. It's more the fact that they don't let it hurt them. Because
no, they do let it hurt them.
Yeah, but they're going to deal with it, and it's life.
Yeah. No, they will accept the pain.
Yeah. It is.
They won't rationalize it. They won't run from it. They'll accept the pain, and they will mourn, and they'll move on.
Yeah, it is praise Buddha.
So
that, like, I was thinking it's very spiritual. Like, why? How can they get away with this? Seriously, it is the praise Buddha of it is.
So yes, but that doesn't make the pain less. You can't rationalize away the pain. You still have to feel the pain. So a way you can look at it is your parents or your grandparents die, and you're very sad, right?
Yeah.
The person that looks up, how do I feel less sad about my parents dying? Or they say, well, they're in a better place. Or they say, oh, that's okay. They were in a lot of pain. They wanted to die. All that sort of thing. Or, oh, I don't actually care about them. I didn't actually care about them. That's an option too.
Yeah.
Or I don't mind that they died. That sort of thing. Those we recognize as unhealthy reactions.
Yeah.
You just have to be sad because someone died.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if you do that is 10 years later, you still care about death. You haven't become jaded and desensitized, and you still care about death.
Yeah.
And yet, that person's death, you might think of them and say, "Oh, that's there's a little old reminder of what happened, but it's not You're over the pain now.
Yeah.
You lived it. You have to live it. There's no... And I think that's the thing. You don't get to live without pain, but you can let the pain flow through you.
Yeah.
And flow out the other side.
And you can make bread and carry water.
So...
You have to keep living, even if it's there.
Here's another problem with the nonsense of the spiritualism stuff. Is... No. The make bread one's fine. I think that's a fine one. No, it's the idea that... Dang. I read... I saw John Campbell was saying today that the COVID vaccine has been shown, at least in one case, to uniquely cause brain damage, separate from the COVID virus.
Yes, so what I saw from that is it seemed a lot like mad cow disease, prion. That's what I got a conclusion.
Now, keep in mind that this is...
a singular case.
The study might be, like, totally legit. Like, it seems like a good study. But this is one guy they autopsied. And now it seems like there's a lot of people who are having troubles getting their relatives autopsied that want to.
Yeah.
So that's something that's a concern of itself. But this guy could have had freak genetics that make vaccines destroy your brain.
Yeah.
Maybe all vaccines do. But you need, like, 30 people to really draw a conclusion. But it is a place to start and say, we need to look.
Yeah.
This is a sign that we really, 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 really need to look.
From also me looking at what mRNA does with spike protein, what it actually does.
It tells you how to generate things, right? Like, it's basically a way to alter your DNA slightly, right? Or your...
No, it's... No.
Well, it imitates the...
No. How does a vaccine work? Not mRNA. How does a vaccine work?
So
from your knowledge, from what you've been told.
So a vaccine gives you either a weakened form of a virus, or it gives you a virus that is similar to that virus.
Yeah.
So that your autoimmune system takes care of the work, and it generates antibodies that can defeat this weaker version, and the antibodies also happen to work against the stronger version.
All right. So what does a virus do?
A virus injects you with mRNA, and it latches onto your cells, and they, instead of producing your own RNA, they produce the virus's RNA, or they produce them in conjunction. Yeah,
and so what does your cells do when they find the affected cell?
They send in the super mega destroyer things that, like, just kill everything in sight. They take no prisoners.
So
I forget their name, but they cause inflammation.
What is a sign of major success for a virus? Like, what's the best thing a virus could do to you?
Keep you infected forever without killing you.
Yeah. And so, what parts there is it going to stay away from? What parts does the virus not want to infect?
Like parts that would kill you, or parts that have, like, crazy good immunities, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So, what mRNA vaccines do is they take the spike protein, so it's a protein, and it sends it into your body, and your cells basically... It has to be carried in because they're actually very destroyable, so they have to be covered in a lipid. And if there's too much lipid, they become too protected. If there's too little, so it's a ridiculous balancing act.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it gets to your cells, and it infects your cells, and it makes those cells start producing spike proteins.
Yeah.
So it's basically like a virus, but it's only producing the spike proteins. So it's basically telling the cell, make this protein. That's what this idea is.
And is that protein an antibody, or...?
No, it makes it produce the spike protein.
What is the spike protein, though?
You know the picture of a virus? It has the little...
Yeah, I know what it is, but what is it?
It's the thing that infects the cell.
So it's making you produce the virus without the infectious virus?
Without the injection of its own DNA in.
Right. Weird.
So it's making you...
But wouldn't that only make you...
Well, those are what it's looked for. So your signal things go and touch those things. Say, oh, this is this. So I
right, but... Okay, maybe this could be my own ignorance, or this could be being too far down some sort of conspiratorial rabbit hole or something, let's say. Okay, but we have no idea how anything works, right? Yes. So how can we say that the only part of the virus our body looks at is the spike protein?
Well, there's something even worse, which is your virus. So current virus is kind of freaky because it infects things and shit, but let's go with the common cold. So common cold really likes your lungs, it really likes your throat, and really likes your nasal passage, and sometimes it goes in the lymphatic system.
Yeah.
It doesn't go near your heart, it doesn't go near your brain.
Yeah.
So a spike protein Like, viruses don't think they're not alive, but a spike protein is an idiot. Like, it's stupider than a virus.
Yeah, so they're finding production in the brain and heart.
Yeah, so it goes anywhere it wants to. And so your cell starts producing these things, and so it basically finds them and kills them. When your brain finds and kills the cells that are infected, it destroys them. Mm-hmm. And so this spike protein just wanders about through your body, and if it's gone to your bloodstream or the lymph system, it will just infect whatever it comes across.
So that makes it sound like, by necessity, an mRNA vaccine would cause brain damage. Like, just by the nature of the...
No, the problem with the mRNA is they have like 3 really big balancing acts they have to do. Which is, one, they have to make sure they have the right amount of elliptic shell around them. Yeah. Because if it's too thick, it will do nothing. If it's too little, it will do nothing. Because either it's too thick and so it never infects anything, or it's too little and it gets destroyed by your body immediately. Mm-hmm. Next, it has to infect only the cells it's meant to infect. Now, the original thought and use for mRNA vaccines was for very rare non-infectious diseases, to treat those and potentially treating cancer. Yes. Thought. So you want it to go to a very specific spot of the body. So you have to be incredibly careful with injecting them. And you have to make sure they go exactly where you want them to. So that's another difficulty with it. Even then, we don't, like the study is saying, oh, these have a huge amount of promise. I used the search engine's feature to go back several years to read about them, so it doesn't have all the stuff put on top. And basically everything's saying, this has a lot of potential. Here are the fields where we think it's applicable. Here's a bunch of problems with it we have to be careful with. And maybe in 10 years, it will be usable. Yeah. Now, this is all from 2018 that I was reading these things. Yeah. And one of the other things is Pfizer and Moderna, especially Pfizer, put a ton of money into developing mRNA vaccines. A ton of money. And they weren't getting any results. And so they were putting more and more money and they weren't getting any results. So they basically had the sunk cost fallacy. We want this to do something. Well,
did you hear that?
And so this is just the conclusions I came to from reading these old studies on it, and then Campbell talking about why it's causing heart problems and then the brain thing. And it just made me think from my studyings years ago of prions, prions are a protein that goes into your body and tells things, hey, become like me.
Well, did you hear about that study that found that the more often you are vaccinated, the more likely you are to be infected?
I didn't hear about that one. But...
And this one is this is a lot of people that looked at. Yeah. So, this is the kind of thing that Snopes would label mostly false or something like that, right? Yeah. Because that doesn't mean the vaccine makes you infected. What that actually means is that people in infectious environments get the vaccine more often. Yeah. But what it also means, on the other hand, is that the vaccine isn't doing anything. Well, because they should be able to get it once and then they would be good to go.
Do you see that comic that John Campbell posted at the end of one of his videos?
No.
So, there's a bunch of cavemen standing around a pile of fruit. One of the cavemen reaches down and picks up a piece of fruit. And he bites into it and keels over and dies. Now, all these cavemen are quite enlightened. Yeah. And so one of the cavemen stands up and puts his finger in the air. Causation does not equal correlation. Yeah. The next panel is all the cavemen are dead and every single piece of fruit has a bite out of it.
Yeah. You have to... It's tricky to... The science, the thing it does is it says we're going to put aside our natural biases, right? Yeah. But the problem, I think, is that we live with the assumptions that we see, not with the science, with what the science says. Because the science, while it is good at getting rid of these natural biases, is also incomplete and can be very, very, very wrong. So it's like the thing I said about psychologists, where when you think you know what makes Joe Schmo tick, say, I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. I could be horribly, terribly, deadly wrong. Yeah. And you'll probably be right. You can have all the scientific backing in the world.
Even the statement of the science, what is the story behind thalidomide? Like, what is this?
Right. So, but that's the thing. So, the science says X, right? Yeah. Means our current best guess.
Yes, exactly.
It does not mean God has ordained.
Yeah. Or this is the truth. The science says.
Science does not mean truth. I think science means knowledge. So this is the best thing we have. Mm-hmm. This is our best guess. We have yet to disprove this thing. Yeah. That doesn't mean, this doesn't mean the irrefutable truth. God has ordained. It means, in a lot of ways, it means the opposite. It means the science says this, attack it if you can. Because the scientific method is about destroying the current. That's the reason why you have to include your method. I hated in science classes in high school writing out methodology. It's like, come on. I just want to do the experiment and be done with it. I want to see what happens. I want to say, how do I do this? Aha, this is how you do it. Okay, cool. The reason you write methodology is so that other people can do it again.
Yeah, repeat it.
I don't know if you've
every single one of your steps.
I don't know if you've heard about the reproducibility crisis, but about 50% of current papers out there can't be reproduced.
We had the thing in our psychology class where we went over this for quite a bit, the reproducibility.
Yeah.
And
it's not just in psychology, it's in every field.
Oh, wow. But in psychology is one of the major ones to recognize this quite early.
Yeah.
Is they're basically, problem A is we can't do a lot of these studies because they're no longer ethical, so we can't reproduce them. Problem C is sometimes they don't tell us what they did. And then, so those two problems have basically ruined about 50% of psychological studies from the past. Then, problem C, we redo these studies and we cannot reproduce the results.
Yeah.
And we're basing a lot of assumptions off those results. So, yeah.
Jordan Peterson had a conversation recently with a former colleague of his.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how psychology, and this is a discussion psychologists have been having related to that, which is psychologists are worried they might be doing psychology wrong because you can figure out facts about how psychology works right now is you try to discover facts about human behavior.
Yeah.
But there's infinite facts about human behavior and only a tiny amount of them are useful.
Yeah.
And knowing one fact only tells you in that exact circumstance, because to treat humans, it might be that you need instead to use a meta-narrative. You need to look at them as a whole. You cannot actually, because a key part of science is isolation, right? You have to do a double-blind study where you eliminate all the other variables.
Yeah.
It may be that no human interaction is possible to separate from a whole.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of problems. They call them the Bing Bong problem, the reproducibility crisis, and a few others. I think it's called the Bing Bong. And what I find interesting is that there was two very famous psychologists,
Freud and Jung?
yeah, who actually did approach it from the side of we'll treat the human as a whole.
Yeah.
And there's others as well, like Carl Rogers, I think,
Yeah.
and he just said all you have to do is listen.
Yeah.
And that's what Freud said as well.
Well, isn't Rogers' method still the main one used?
I don't know. I think behaviorism has always been the main one used, or something like that. Well,
Because
once it was discovered.
even though people seem to don't like Freud a lot of the time, basically you can draw a line from Freud to Jung to Rogers, and that's basically one of the best methods to use is those three.
I think Rogers is his various methods he has, I think, are the only ones that have been proven to be effective. There's very few therapeutic techniques that are shown to be effective. Well, and that doesn't mean that therapy doesn't work. It means that every therapist is actually like going off the seat of their pants, basically, and it's working.
Well, was it Freud or Jung who didn't even want to face his patients?
That was Freud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't want his facial expressions to.
He wanted them to be alone and just talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jung was more like, okay, you've just got to individuate, or you've got to whatever.
Because I
conform.
A lot of psychologists find it useful to see their patient.
Freud was like, no, I can't give anything away. And then Carl is basically just, I will listen. I will listen so hard I will cure you. Yeah,
well, Jordan Peterson was talking about his method one time, which is he finds it sometimes useful for his patients to see his reaction, because they say something and he goes, and it's like he gets a look of horror, and then they realize what they just said causes him horror.
And then you have like William James, who I think is a lot more like Jordan Peterson, where his method is you give advice, right? Mm-hmm. And the advice is you're responsible for everything that happens to you.
Yeah.
And that was like, there's a bunch of great ones. Skinner, I think, was the one that everyone...
B.F. Skinner, right?
Maybe. But he's the guy everyone got behind.
Yeah.
Because his was so much more easy to study.
The Skinner box.
Yeah. His method was so much more easy to study, stimulus response. Because it's like, you go boo and a person goes, okay, we can work with that. It's a lot easier. And so that's behaviorism.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually what Jordan Peterson was trained in, was behaviorism. And Jordan Peterson talks about behaviorist techniques like, okay, like for curing agoraphobia. Okay, you're terrified of elevators. So how about we get you to look at a picture of an elevator?
Yeah.
Okay, now how about we let you look at an elevator with the doors closed? Now they'll open once. Like, that's behaviorism, right?
Yeah.
And it does great. It works great sometimes. Like there's a lot of different methods out there, and they all work. But
I do agree with the flying with the seat of the pants, though.
But the problem is that there's more therapists than ever. There's more mentally ill people than ever. Therapists aren't curing humanity. They're maybe helping individuals.
Yeah.
Maybe. It's like we need a preacher more than we need a psychologist. We need a preacher who can go up on stage and cure his congregation. Yeah. And this could all just be downstream of the meaning crisis.
Yeah.
And it probably is.
From the death of God.
And apparently Jordan Peterson, well, I guess we're talking about psychology, so it's going to come up. But they've been working on something.
Yeah.
To counteract this, which I find, even if they come up with something, who's going to listen? Like, we already have the answers. We have all of Western philosophy, all of Eastern philosophy. We've got Jung, we've got Freud, we've got Campbell. We've already
novelty of the new.
Or just saying it in modern terms, contemporary terms. That it's like, because all I can think he's going to say is what he's been saying for the past 30 years, which is you need to have a highest ideal that you work towards and never reach, and it's better to, as he put it, it's better to shoot and aim poorly than to not do anything.
Yeah.
And that will give you, something to, because motion is what matters, right? You have to climb the infinite stair. It doesn't matter how you do it. You go up in wheelchair or in rollerblades, or you run up, or you slide down. It's the motion that matters. And that's his talk with Constantine was interesting, because Constantine's like me, he doesn't believe in stuff. And so Jordan Peterson was trying to get him to believe in God. And I think Jordan Peterson basically it was basically a dialogue between Ivan and the saint from Brothers Karamazov. I forget the saint's name. The old man that Ilyusha serves. But Ivan says to him, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, that I know everything is meaningless, and it's not that I know, but I don't see how there's meaning in anything, and I can't believe in anything, and it doesn't make sense to me that there's a God. And so in theory, it doesn't matter what you do, right? Like, you should be able to murder your father and go free and do anything. Yeah. And that's why his father was murdered, was because Ivan convinced someone of that, potentially. Yeah. It's actually left kind of unresolved what happened in the book. But Ivan basically convinces someone with his incredibly intelligent atheism of this thing that nothing matters, right? You can do anything because there is no God to judge you at the end of days. And Ivan says, and I know all this, but I can't help but feel that there's still meaning. And Ivan's an atheist, remember? Yeah. And that is basically how the discussion between Jordan Peterson and Konstantin Kisin went, was the exact same thing. Yeah. And I don't know, Jordan Peterson, I said on the podcast before, he's very similar to Ivan. But it seems like since his illness, maybe, he's made the leap from Ivan to the saint. And I don't know if it's out of desperation or out of insight, I guess would be the way to put it. Like, I don't know how you can make that leap. And he's doing a very poor job of explaining it or even understanding that he did make that leap. So, because it's very tricky. Like, we've talked about how a lot of believers seem to think that atheists are believing and just lying. And then a lot of atheists are like, you're just deluding yourself. You just want a reason to not feel scared of death. But what's interesting, Jordan Peterson's conversation with Konstantin really made me think I am right about his belief in that he definitely doesn't believe in the bearded man in the sky. He just believes in the ultimate sandwich. Yeah. He just believes that you should move towards it. And the reason that is God instead of instinct or intuition is because it seems to be shared. Yeah. So he thinks it's outside of humans. But that doesn't mean that there's any, this is what I would have wanted to ask is, so there's still no comfort for death. Like, you have completely decoupled the afterlife from this image of God. And he probably would say that he hasn't, but I would want to know how, because that's very interesting, I think.
One thing I concluded lately, for myself, I'm pretty certain I believe in God, which is a weird statement, and you had trouble with that before. but I am 100% certain that I believe in religion.
And by that you mean its utility, or?
Not its utility, like, religion isn't its utility, but more of people can't escape it. Like religion is almost more real than God.
So this was actually something Jordan Peterson brought up, which was Richard Dawkins seemed to think that if he got rid of the last vestiges of religion that have been dying since the 1800s, then everyone would become an enlightened scientist, like him.
Yeah.
Right. And Jordan Peterson said, and I agree, that there are people that can be enlightened scientists, like Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
I would have used Sam Harris as an example, but I don't actually think that's true. Maybe like myself, maybe. So there are several people out there on Earth, not many, like, maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 10 or something, or 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, whatever the number. There are people that can be that way. But most people, when you get rid of God, what they do is they create a new one.
Yeah.
And that's how you get this new wave that is, destroying Roald Dahl's works, for example.
Yes.
And
even with Peter Hitchens, that's the guy you're talking about, right? Sorry. The enlightened scientist?
Richard Dawkins?
Yeah, sorry, Richard Dawkins.
Yeah. Or Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, but Richard Dawkins, I'm not even convinced that he is without religion.
I don't, he seems very he loves reality. He loves, I don't know if you've listened to the song Greatest Show on Earth.
I think I have.
It's by Nightwish.
Maybe not. No, I have, yes.
That's based on one of his books. He thinks humanity is amazing. He thinks life is amazing. So that doesn't mean he believes in God.
No, I'm not saying, religion doesn't require belief in God.
I'm not sure about that. I think faith and religion and wonder are all different.
Maybe.
Because religion has connotations of organization and sharedness.
Fair enough. Fine, not religion, then faith.
Yeah.
I think faith is something humanity can't escape.
Yeah.
That's more accurate. Like, religion's...
No, I think you're also right, though. For the most part, humanity can't escape religion.
Yeah.
Like, people, once they give up God, they'll become an SJW, or they'll become a neo-Nazi, or whatever makes them... Or they'll become a socialist. Whatever gives them meaning.
Oh, this is insane. I didn't realize... I learned this very recently, but especially that game showed it off, the Talk Heart. Looking at communist architecture, the inside of it, their train stations, their, buildings of office... Those are all churches to the state that we that statue. I think the most epic statue in the world. That woman with the sword.
Yeah, tallest statue on Earth. Yeah.
So that is religion.
Brothers Dostoevsky said exactly that. Yeah. They said that if you get rid of God, then state will become the church.
Yeah.
And
you do not worship in the house of God, you worship in the house of the state.
And he said, the more you care about everyone, the less you care about individuals.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening today, Dostoevsky predicted 100% accuracy.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do anything. And for Nietzsche based a lot of his stuff on Dostoevsky. And he was also right, and it just keeps going and going and going. And it's like...
Amenhotep needs to burn the world. Is it Amenhotep or is Amun-Ra?
I guess it'd be Amun-Ra, yeah. But
Amun-Ra needs to burn the world.
Yeah, but that was the Book of Thoth that said that, the world will end and a new age will dawn. And it's spooky, that. On the note of the end of the world, actually, maybe we can make this our last topic.
All right.
Last time you were really trying to convey your misgivings about the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I came to the realization, I think, I could be wrong here, and you can let me know if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think the miscommunication, or first of all, you hadn't had your thoughts completely worked out. You just had this general feeling of mis-ease. But so the problem wasn't you there. The problem was that I was I don't get what your problem is. And I think the reason why I didn't get what your problem was I am too far down the conspiracy or cynicism, whatever you want to call it, hole.
Yeah.
Because... Well, I like history, right? So the United States has a proven record of... So let's see if I can list them off the top of my head. Of coups in Iran, Guam, Honduras, Nicaragua, Brazil, Chile, Iraq, Libya, Chad, Hawaii.
Hawaii?
Yeah. Cuba, Yeah, they killed the king, put their own leader in place, and then conquered the country. Um,
So basically,
Dominican Republic, Haiti. I think Haiti was Haiti one. Maybe Haiti's not one.
I know we're in a younger country than the United States, and like United States isn't all that old, but even then, United States is a country like all the others.
Yeah.
It's just currently the one with big boots.
So this is their record of proven
Yeah.
coups. Right now in Peru, I don't know if I talked to you about this before or not, but there was a meeting with a bunch of business people, and then the Peruvian prime minister was taken down by his entire government and all his people, and they put in someone who is far more right-wing, and she is much more in line with the United States.
So,
And we don't know if the United States was responsible, but the events line up.
I know that is it the CIA or the Black Budget Group? What are those? Is that the CIA?
Like the CIA is the one doing all these coups.
Yeah. So, because there is a certain level, like one of the levels of disbelief for the most recent thing is
Afghanistan.
the bureaucratic nightmare and political quagmire that the United States is. It's hard to believe that any sector within the United States is competent enough to do that. So is the CIA basically completely autonomous and separate from the rest of the bloated creature that the U.S. bureaucratic and political system is?
There's the Congo. That's another one. Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, related to Vietnam, and this answers your question slightly. I also go back to Iran because that also answers your question. But
Well, yeah, I guess even in Afghanistan. Or...
Kennedy was in charge
Yeah.
during Vietnam, and so there was a leader. He was this educated guy. All these people are called terrible dictators by the press, right?
Yeah.
You look at the old leader of Vietnam's face, and you're like, really? He looks like the happiest guy on earth. Like, maybe he's that much of a psychopath, but it's like, how is this guy evil? Like, you look at him and you're like, you look at someone like Che Guevara and you're like, I could see it. I could see him being evil. I could also see him being a hero, but I could see him being evil.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like that. But this guy, he looks like an idealistic university student of the I love everyone kind, not the we have to kill some people to get to paradise kind. But who knows? Maybe he was, because I think he was like very left-leaning socialist type. So maybe he was. But this guy gets cooed out of office, and so he retreats to nearby country, Laos, I think, and he wants to go meet with his brother at a church. He's the first Catholic leader as well of Vietnam or something like that.
Yeah.
So he goes to meet with his brother at a church to figure out, what do we do? How do we get out of here? Do we try to take back the country? Whatever. While he's there, he's ambushed, shot dead, executed summarily, without trial. Kennedy was incredibly upset by this because he was like, okay, I got to get rid of this dictator, so I'll give the CIA the go-ahead.
Yeah.
But I didn't want him killed. I just wanted him out of office.
Mm.
And he's just shot down by these thugs, these mercenaries. And maybe the CIA didn't hire the mercenaries. Maybe it was coincidence, but it was like right next to each other. And then it was only like 30 days later that Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah.
And Kennedy also didn't like the CIA. And he also talked about how there was stuff the American people needed to know and he was going to announce. So the biggest coup the CIA might have ever done was the United States. So that's one thing. So first of all, I think you could say that the CIA might be the people in charge of the United States.
Yeah.
And the presidents don't matter so much. The second thing is Iran was their first really big modern coup.
Yeah.
That was the British government was talking to a CIA guy and said, hey, you guys did well in Hawaii and Puerto Rico or wherever it was. I think you could help us out with Iran because they want to keep all their oil for themselves. You'll notice that basically all these events, it's for democracy, but it also happens to keep the United States dollar afloat.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we get to keep our oil, we get to keep our gold, we get to keep our uranium. And then like Gaddafi was like, all Africans, all the money in Libya will go to Africans and Africans only. All the oil will go to Africans. We're going to change from the American standard to a gold standard. We're going to base all our money on the gold standard. And then, oh, he's a tyrant, get him. And you'll notice it happens again and again and again.
Yeah.
In Afghanistan, they're like, oh, this guy's a horrible, evil tyrant. And I think in this case he was actually allied with the Soviets. So we'll send in we'll give people a bunch of weapons and money. We'll send in two of them in particular, Osama bin Laden and the founder of ISIS. They were the charge of the people that overthrew and took over Afghanistan.
And I guess that was kind of a screw up because then...
And when that guy was overthrown, he said, you will rue this day, and the weapons you use against us today will be used against you tomorrow. And then, like, 20 years later, the worst ever attack against the United States happens.
Yeah.
And then after that, ISIS happens.
Yeah.
Because the United States hired 2 highly competent people.
Yes.
Maybe 2 of the most competent people in history. Well, I'm not so sure about ISIS, but, like, still, the fact that he made ISIS is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But Osama bin Laden's on another level.
Yeah.
These 2 guys.
And so they spent, 20, 30, 40 years trying to clean up the mess of Osama bin Laden?
Well, I mean, the attack was in 2001, and so it's been... And Iraq, so 20 years. Yeah. So there was that. So, going back to Iran, the British, BP Oil, it was actually, said, hey, they want to take their oil back. We want to keep the oil. Can you get rid of this guy and put someone that likes oil?
Yeah.
And so, fruit is another big one. The banana companies had this problem. Yeah. And so, they sent in either the head of the CIA or one of their operatives with $30 million. And they said, get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
So this is one guy against a country. It's like the book The Wasp.
Yeah.
And he won. And so what he did was he would go to a group of people and he'd say, hey, I'm a representative of the leader of the country who they want to get rid of. But he'd say, yeah, I work for, I forget his name is like Mufasa or something. But he's like, I work for Big M. Yeah. Here's $30,000. Go and rough up some Jews. And so then be like, oh, okay, if the leader wants, like on the down low, right? Because we don't want it to get back to the leader, right? Yeah. And they're like, oh, okay. But then the word gets out that the leader was hiring thugs to go beat up Jews. Yeah. And then he funds a protest for Jews. He says, hey, the government's treating you poorly. Here.
So he literally just made a country implode.
So he kept going to groups and then he'd go to the newspapers and say, only report on the bad stuff that's going on. Only report on these attacks on the Jews. Only report on this. Then he'd go to extremists like the Jewish Defense League and he'd say, hey, I like what you're doing. Here's $1 million. Work, keep it up to defend the Jews. Yeah. And then he'd go to like a Muslim group that hated the Jews and he'd be like, I really like what you're doing. Here, get those Jews out of our country. Because he had $30 million. And so he's just spending this money everywhere. Yeah. And he's like, he started a Jewish protest of like 100,000 people. He seeded it basically. He's like, okay, I can't remember, maybe it wasn't 100,000, maybe it was 30,000, but he goes to like 1,000 people and he says, we're doing a march here. I need some bodies for the march. And so nothing is like suspicious, right? Because it's like, yeah, march needs bodies, so we'll go and we'll start protesting in the streets. That erupts into a bloody riot. Suddenly everyone hates this leader. Get rid of this leader. He's allowing these bloody riots to happen. He's destroying the Jews. He's allowing the Jews to happen. And then it's like, okay, well, let's give, money to this campaign to get the guy we want in. Yeah. And this is one man with $30 million defeats a country. Yeah. So the CIA doesn't have to be competent all the way down. It needs like 6 good agents.
All right, so back to then, you're saying you didn't understand my problem.
Yeah. Well, actually, just slightly more on that first, is the CIA...
Also, black budget's different, I recall, than CIA.
Oh, dang, I forgot. Jeez. Yeah, I swear. No, it wasn't you. I forgot before. It's like this. I tell you that study needs to be replicated on the COVID brain damage. So this, I know about these things, right? I knew about them, maybe not in massive detail, but I know about them in general. Yeah. The United States and Russia have been at war since the 40s, and they have been doing it through proxy wars all around the world.
The Cold War never really stopped.
Yeah, and it was never really cold. Like, there was wars going on everywhere. Yeah. The United States and Russia have been at war for, 40, 60, 80 years. And they do it covertly, right? Yeah. And they are both domineering oligarchs controlling resources and maneuvering. Yeah. They're both imperial. They're both empires. Yeah. The difference between the United States and Russia and China... The United States is way better at it, and their propaganda is way better. So when I see the United States backing the Ukraine with their boy, with this very rich place, I think, yeah, they're conquering Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine is already conquered. Russia's just trying to take it.
No, because Ukraine's not part of NATO or anything.
No, but it was already conquered. Like, if you look at the history of Ukraine, he was put in... Like, there was big riots, and he was put in...
Yeah, well, in 2014, there was a lot of there was a potential coup, but that isn't proven by any means. But as far as I'm aware, but yeah, they're protecting their interest.
Yeah.
So when you say I feel uneasy about what's going on, and I'm like, okay, what about this coup is making you uneasy? When it's like, okay, so there's a coup, right? And you're uneasy beyond that. So there's and there is a couple questions to not be totally swept away, which is to what extent does the United States condone these actions, and how much is it just very powerful high-ups in the government doing stuff? And then how much power do these actually give them? Are they just sticking, like, because it's not quite the same as an empire having a leader that likes you, right?
Yeah.
You're basically saying you're not allowed to have a leader that doesn't like us, but you're not controlling the country directly.
Yeah.
So there is that. They often put in horrible dictators in charge, so like Pinochet. So there's that, which isn't good. And I don't know much about Ukraine, but Zelensky doesn't seem to be like a Osama bin Laden or a Pinochet, or
No.
like he seems to be a much better person and much better leader than that.
Yeah.
Depending on your, well, Pinochet has his admirers, but
yeah. So Che Guevara.
Yeah, he wasn't a leader ever though.
No.
But
he was one of those guys, was he? Basically, kind of installed by them.
No, he's the opposite. He's like one of the very few people that has ever successfully taken down the United States.
Oh, okay.
No, he's like Cuba was failure for the United States.
Ah, okay.
Che Guevara and Castro beat them.
Ah,
and that doesn't happen too often.
Che Guevara and the pasta dish, right?
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often that we're aware of. Maybe it does all the time. Maybe they're always getting repelled. Who knows? So now Russia, like they took Georgia, they took Crimea. Russia actually conquers and takes over the governments.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of them, like Chechnya, I think it's called, or something, and Georgia are semi-autonomous. Like, Russia is actually
a traditional empire?
Well, it's like a unite... Like, you don't see it when you look at the map, but Russia actually contains a bunch of countries inside.
Yeah.
And they have kind of autonomy. Like, they can sort of do what they want, to a degree. But it's much more blatant that they're conquering. Whereas the United States is saying, you put someone in charge that doesn't make the Americans rich, we're going to kill them. Or we're going to get rid of them and put someone that does make the Americans rich in charge. So you could argue, America is a lot like Rome. And the question is, we're basically Romans. What do we think of Rome? It's like, do we want... I heard someone else put it away. Living in the United States, or let's say one of its close allies like Canada.
You know what? I'm not going to call Canada its close ally. It's one of its subjects. Yeah,
but we're so culturally in tune that it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah.
Like, we will do what they want anyways.
We're not another state, but we are another state.
Yeah. Being a member of the United States is like being the grandson or granddaughter of a mafiosa, like the Godfather type figure. You know they do something kind of bad, but you don't want to look into it too much because then you might not like what you learn, and you really like them, and they have a lot of good values and things that you respect about them.
And they're providing a lot.
And you really like what they have to provide.
Yeah.
And so I think the United States is quite a bit like the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Now
the Roman Empire was basically a bunch of mafias.
Yeah. So I guess my question is about Ukraine then is, how likely is it that this is the United States trying to conquer the Ukraine, essentially, by proxy? And I say very likely.
Yeah.
And how much... Now, I do think it's not always one or the other, right? I think there might be idealism of we want to keep the Ukrainians free. That might be mixed in as well. It might be both. It probably is both.
Yes.
But there's also the fact that, like, the military-industrial complex is making bank off of this.
Yeah.
And that's among other things. And it's securing a foothold right next to Russia. And if Russia loses this war, they might never win a war again. Because they've already shown themselves to be way weaker than expected. And if they can't at least scrape out a win from this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a total annexation of Ukraine. They could just say, we killed all the Nazis and we're going home.
And we got the land that we wanted.
Yeah. They don't even need the land. They could just say, there was Nazis in Ukraine, we got rid of them. Or there was election tampering, we stopped it.
Yeah.
That's all they have to do. But if they can't scrape out some sort of win, then that's saying to the world they will never win again.
Yeah.
And the only thing they have going for them, if they don't win the Ukraine war, or they really start losing the Ukraine war, is that they are still either the strongest or one of the strongest nuclear powers on Earth.
Yeah.
And we really don't want that on the back foot. And that doesn't mean we should bow down to anyone who has nuclear weapons. But it does mean, I think, that Russia has to be able to lose with grace if they lose. The United States or Ukraine has to give them an out.
Yeah.
You have to say to them, okay, we need to give you a win so that this doesn't, we need Putin and Biden need to sit down and say, how do we make this look good for both of us? Like what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they did. They said, we've got to make this look good for both of us. And what happened in that case was Kennedy was like, okay, you take the missiles out of Cuba, I'll take the missiles out of Turkey. And the Russians said, okay, and we will take the blame for it. And they're like, okay. And so they didn't talk too much about Turkey, but they hammed up Cuba, and crisis was averted. And I think they need to do something similar again. And hopefully they will, because, in theory, no one's idiots and they know what they're doing here. But the problem is there are people making a lot of money, and they might be short-sighted and influencing people like Biden and saying...
I've heard, apparently, this is hearsay, so I'll couch that with hearsay. And also, this comes out, 3-4 months after we do it? So that also causes things people are like, well, obviously, you idiots, that's the case. It's all been proven. But apparently, there was attempted meetings right near the start, and they were blocked.
Yeah.
Their actors saying, no, we don't want this. And on top of that...
Yeah, if that's true, that's awful.
Yeah, and on top of that, Russia is currently trying to repair the Nord Stream pipeline that was blown up.
Yeah. And there was an American reporter that released a massive...
Norwegians and Americans basically worked together to blow up the pipeline.
Yeah, so I heard about this guy releasing this document.
Yeah.
And I looked up, like you did with the other thing, I looked up the news about the Nord Stream before this was announced.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see why people thought it would be Russia. Because it didn't make any sense at all. At the time, even.
Yeah.
But people are saying, well, it could be Russia, it could be Germany, it could be the United States. No. It's only the United States.
Yeah.
That's the only option.
Yeah.
Why would anyone else do this?
Especially given that Russia's now trying to repair it.
Yeah. Germany did it because they hate not freezing. Russia did it because
they don't know how to turn a switch.
Well, Russia did it because they want... What destroying the pipeline does is it gives Europe no reason to not fight Russia.
Yeah.
Or rather, because if the pipeline exists, Russia can say to Europe, don't join the fight, or I'll shut off your gas.
Yeah.
Whereas, if the pipeline doesn't exist, then Europe's like, what destroying the pipeline is it's Sun Tzu's lead your army to a box canyon, so that they have no escape and they will fight like weasels.
Yeah.
That's it makes so much sense. The only problem is, if Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, that's a really good move for them. But maybe they don't have the capability to do it. If the United States does it, that might be a declaration of war, and we really, really don't want the United States fighting Russia in a full-out war. We have to all pretend that this is Ukraine versus Russia.
Yes.
Because if the United States is fighting Russia, then Russia doesn't have to hold back.
And then China also fights.
Well, maybe not. But Russia can't hold back.
Yeah.
Russia... Just because Russia's losing doesn't mean they can't win.
Well, it's not even clear if they're losing or winning, because there's fog of war, and like you said, the United States is an amazing propagandist.
And also, Russia always wins defensive wars.
Yeah.
They've only been beaten by, the Mongols.
And the Japanese.
But who owns, Kamchatka right now? It's Russia.
Is that the little island that
little peninsula thing? Yeah. That's owned by Russia now. So Japan didn't even win forever.
Yeah.
I mean, neither did the Mongols. Russia's still around. The Mongols aren't.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, they're a little country now. Yeah, Russia wins in the end. I mean, maybe that's just being defeatist, but it's a very nasty country to take.
Yes.
And so, with your concerns, is that fully addressed by the coup, or do you think, or is your concern more, there seems to be...
Well, that concern has been replaced partly by... Man, the propaganda is effective.
Unless it's... See, that's the problem.
But also there's the secondary concern of Trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too.
Let's say the United States is being totally honorable in this war.
Yeah.
And it's all just let Ukraine keep their land, end the war, done.
Yeah.
When you give yourself that bad of a track record, it's really hard for people to trust you. And that's why you don't give yourself that sort of track record.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying Russia does this thing too. Russia has done tons of coups and stuff like that too. It's not saying the United States is uniquely bad.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. The propaganda that says we good, they bad. It's like, no, you're both empires playing Machiavellian games.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess your problem was more that so many people seem to be just, Russia bad.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of racist remarks against Russians recently, actually.
Well,
I've read it.
One of the things that really struck me,
Awful place.
I saw a video called Ukrainian Agony.
Yeah.
It's made by a German independent journalist.
Yeah.
And it's about the 2014 carrying on. Like, basically, Ukraine has been at war since 2012 or 2014. Like, it is being... And this guy's trying to point that out.
Well, I've heard claims of civil war, yeah.
Yeah. Well, his video showed the civil war that's going on in Ukraine. That's been happening forever, and no one talks about it. Now...
But if no one talks about it, is it just a lot of revolts, like in the United States during their... What do they call it? Summer of Love?
Yeah, well...
Because that can look pretty bad.
It's also happening all along the Russian border, and there's Russian voluntary soldiers who head over into Ukraine to do the fighting. Now, one of the things about this guy is a lot of sites and like things I was looking into him because I wanted to look up. They call him a Russian asset, and it's Russian propaganda. Now, my problem was I looked at all these sites who are calling him that, and the other sites who called him independents. And again, you said, like, look at the track record of the site. Every single site that called him a Russian asset, the writers of these sites either have an invested interest to call him that, or they're terrible people in general. And everyone who's saying he's just an independent journalist who saw something and tried to make a documentary on it that no one else was doing, were basically like, yeah, not much information on this guy, but this is who he is. And they all seem pretty straightforward, like very bland, gray websites of, yeah, this is him. Mm-hmm. And so there's even that thing of, is the documentary Ukrainian Agony a Russian psyop, which has a high chance of being, or is it this guy just trying to make a documentary about injustice he sees that a lot of people are told is a Russian psyop?
And what really...
And so it's like that, it's not Catch-22, but it's definitely a sort of damned if you are, damned if you don't, sort of hard to tell.
So do you know about...
And then Callum's videos of... I mean, maybe Callum's a psyop as well, as Carl accuses him of being. But Callum's videos of... He recently traveled to Russia. He actually did. And he went to one of the borders where there's fighting going on. And it's very much the situation we talked about earlier of it's terrible on both sides. That was my conclusion. And it's messy.
So something to take away from this is that Iranian coup, right?
Yeah.
Very effective, it turned out to be. That means it's going to have a lot of copycats. Which means that even the idiots that are saying, rah, rah, Russia bad, could be Russian, Chinese, American agents trying to aim for some angle or another. And like the Black Lives Matter protests, that could have been anti-black people agents from China.
And currently the weather balloon people, while they're not getting shot down, are giggling at the spectacle.
But it's it happened in Iran. It's happening in every country.
Yeah.
There's no reason it's not. So when you, this might make you feel a little bit better, but when you see a lot of, like, I don't know if you've been on Reddit, but
I do be on Reddit sometimes.
It has some of the most awful people on earth.
Yes.
I've never seen anything like it. Like
well, maybe you should try going to 4chan and see how that makes
4chan's way better.
Really?
Because they're
self-aware that they're horrible.
The Redditors think they're good people.
Yeah.
They think that they are doing the right thing by... So RimWorld recently, I don't know if you've noticed, they're permanently reducing the price in a bunch of countries.
Yeah, you've talked about it.
No, I haven't.
Oh, no, okay.
This is new. So I said they raised the price for Dead Cells. RimWorld is lowering the price in a bunch of countries, including Canada.
Yeah.
You read the comments on that. Tons of people saying, what a horrible company, awful people. Why can't they lower it more? Why isn't this game on sale more? These people are so greedy and selfish. I hate this company. I hope they die. But what make you feel a little bit better is amount of those people could be just, hey, here's $1,000 a month. Just cause chaos wherever you can.
Do you watch The Britisher?
No?
That's basically what he said to a certain extent. Not quite that, but he's saying that there's things going on all sides of the propaganda levels.
Yeah, there is. Like that's not a that's not a theory, that's a fact.
Yeah.
It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact.
Yeah.
And also, this is there was college students during the Hillary Trump campaign that were hired to dominate comment sections with Hillary's the best, so that you wouldn't see the Trump comments. Like that, there was people hired to do that we know about. There was probably Trump people hired too, but we know about the Hillary ones.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean Trump's better. That means his agents are better.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's a better person. And then you also see people will get engagement on their YouTube videos by starting random fights for no reason. Yeah. Someone will put an innocuous comment like, wow, that's a really good idea. And that's like, are you kidding? This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. This guy's a moron and his whole family are drug addicts.
I don't know if it's Mandalore or Seth admitted to making a controversial take or saying something slightly wrong, just so people point it out or disagree with them. Like, one of them is admitted to doing that.
Yeah. But people also will reply in comments with, like, these things. But yeah, YouTubers can do that as well. You can make a spelling mistake. You can use the wrong "your," and suddenly you get twice as much engagement.
Or you just pronounce a stupid Japanese word wrong, and everyone thinks you're an idiot.
Yeah, this stuff does happen, and the problem is that you have people, they're doing it just to make money, right? A lot of them. Like, some of them, like, China's probably trying to destroy the United States. The United States is probably trying to destroy China. Fair enough with those, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you're trying to stay the top dog. But there's also people doing it to their own communities and to their own citizens to make a buck. And great, you make $1 now and your country falls into ruin 6 years down the line.
Yeah.
It's not pretty. It's the same with, like, clickbait, where news is just useless now. Like, it was a way to get people to click on it, but now it's all just sensationalism.
Yeah.
There's a game called You Become What You Behold. I don't know if you've ever played it. We'll play it after, okay?
All right.
It's really interesting. But yeah, go. It's a free game, so it's online. So yeah, if you're listening, just look up We Become What We Behold. It's a quick little game on itch. It takes like 5 minutes to play. Really interesting. I actually, I guess we'll end there. All right. Yeah. But yeah, I guess the reason I was having troubles communicating, I guess, was I was like, duh, the alien and lizard people are controlling the government. Of course, there's corruption. But it's not so much duh as, like, I just wasn't thinking in terms of...
I was very much under the, if all men doubt you, but make their allowance for doubting too, of, like, when the whole world shouts at you that this is right and that is wrong.
It's like...
It's very hard to go, but isn't that, like...
But that's the thing. You feel alone, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal of propaganda. Most people don't actually think that.
I mean, even a way to do propaganda, which is, like, double insidious, is, like, the Russians, right, could be throwing this propaganda that Russia is bad. So then people like me, who are the character from Malzahn, is the people in the middle are the ones we hate the most.
Well, that's the only good reason Russia could have been the ones to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. But it's like, that's too convoluted for me. It's like, are you going to take that risk?
It's like, let's get this random person with, Russia is actually bad, yes. And then he says, but this person, he's like, well, I'm enlightened, and I think the country is actually good, so I'm going to support Russia now.
Yeah, I really think that I think that's called the Xanatos Gambit, and from Gargoyles. And, like, you have to really know someone for that to pay off. Like, it's reverse psychology.
Yeah.
That's less weebish or whatever. I haven't actually watched Gargoyles, for the record. I just read a lot of TV Troops, which is way better. Honest. One aspect of propaganda, and this is what the SJWs have done in bulk, is you make people feel alone. So you think society all thinks one way, and you're afraid to step out of line. But it's like 1% of radicals that think that way.
I went to Russia today just to see what they're posting. And honestly, it's a lot more reasonable in some ways because they just don't see...
It's typically Russian books that you'll see a lot of the propaganda in.
Yeah.
So Russians tend to read a lot more than
and their music has it.
most people. Right, but like their books right now, they publish these, like they mass produce these like adventure novels, and they're all about how Russia's great and their country was stolen from them by the Ukrainians, and so people don't necessarily get it as much from the news. They get it from their Harry Potter and their Marvel and whatnot. So, and of course, Operation Mockingbird happened in the United States, or was proposed to influence the media to get the people on your side, and so. You notice most American media is like, rah, rah, soldiers, amazing. So there is an aspect there.
Yeah.
But they don't tend to say, like, manifest destiny in their movies so much.
Not anymore, thankfully.
But that is something that you sort of see in Russian literature, is manifest destiny, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't need to manifest destiny anymore because they got Canada and Mexico. Well, not Mexico yet, maybe. But yeah. All right, I'll end it there. Bye.
Bye.
Hello, and welcome. Actually, wait, no, I wanted to add something, which was arguing... I want to add something, which is that arguing with my mom isn't... I want to add something, which is that arguing with our mother can be annoying about UFOs. Because I'll say, look, there's all this proof that UFOs exist. There's this and this and this and this and this. And now the United States government's coming out and the FBI is coming out and they're all saying it's real. And this Navy captains have given sworn testimony. And she's like, well, yeah. It's like, but... It's like, yeah, but obviously, like, we've been seeing this stuff for years. You're taking all the fun out of it. I want to be misunderstood. No, I don't want to be misunderstood. It's just, it's funny to talk to someone that's like further down the rabbit hole than you, in a way. Anyways, bye.